Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again. This is part 2 of year 2 of the NotInHallOfFame.com mock committee, where we are transparent. We are going to work all together to walk us through who we think should be in the 2022 Pro Football Hall of Fame class. We've got some new faces. We've got some returning faces. I don't know if we should go to introduce everyone or just as soon. How about this? The first time that you interject, just introduce yourself. So I'll go first. Kirk Buckner, owner of NotInHallOfFame.com. And I'm going to plug my other stuff because, hey, why not? The Fictitious Athlete Hall of Fame.com. Yeah, that's actually not .com. Fictitious Athlete Hall of Fame, Fictitious Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And some of the people on this panel are part of the United States Athletic Hall of Fame. Believe it or not, no one put that together. Evan and I did. How did a Canadian, Evan, figure this out? And then Chicago and Bostonian American?
Because we actually were looking at the Canadian and Australian National Hall of Fames. We're like, who's in the US Hall of Fame? And realized nobody had one. So it's too simple an idea not to try and do something with. So,
yeah. So with that, we had everyone vote. We've had more votes than people because some people wanted to put in their votes, but were not able to attend tonight. The Pro Football Hall of Fame threw us a bit of a curve. I thought, based on past history, that they would be doing that next week, because usually they do it the last week of the regular season. That didn't happen this year. So thank you all for attending and getting your votes in. This really means a lot to me personally, and to Evan, I'll say on your behalf. I think I've gotten to know you well enough where I can pretty much get things right on your behalf, I think.
Close enough. One other thing I think we should do, we're going to introduce ourselves as we talk here. But I also think, Kirk, why don't you tell everyone your bias as to what your favorite team is?
New Orleans Saints.
Yeah. A guy from Canada liking the Saints just because you like the Nordiques and that's the league.
That's as good a reason as any. When I was growing up, the Bills were crap.
Fair enough. By the way, I'm Evan Nolan. I'm the co-host of the main podcast here on NotInHallOfFame.com. The buck stops here. And I am living in Chicago, but I have the bias on the shirt. I am a Patriots fan. So.
Oh, we got some.
I got it.
Oh, okay. All right. Perfect. All right. So I guess at this point, Evan, do you want to bring up what all the votes are?
I'm not quite ready yet.
Not quite
Give
ready?
me one more second. I apologize. I'm in the sixes at the moment.
All right. Not a problem. All right. So with this being our second stage, we have already done this for the first stage. We will all be reconvening probably 2 weeks before the Super Bowl. We'll figure out the exact date. I believe that it's the Thursday before they're announcing the actual class. They're expediting that this year. Vinny, you always know this stuff.
Yeah, usually what they do is that.
Okay, Paul just said yes. Okay.
Yeah, usually what happens is that they would generally show off their list of the finalists back in like early January, like just before the playoffs started. But like you said, they threw a bit of a curveball, and now it's the last few days of December. So I assume that, assuming they don't show, yeah, Paul just says Thursdays they move the NFL Honor Show back. Yes, that is also true. Also because of the expansion of the extra regular season game, the Super Bowl being on the second Sunday. I assuming that it's going to be the same way for the NFL honors, that they're going to be showing the actual electees, the whole 8 electees, assuming that there's no one that leaves out on the 12th.
And I think another big thing to mention, for those who might just be watching or listening to this for stage 2, we combined our votes for our group that we elected or we advanced to the semifinalists and those that the Pro Football Hall of Fame did. So all of us, we didn't vote from 26 people, we voted from 37.
Correct.
So,
and when you see it up on the screen, for those of you who are watching, it's going to be color coded in 3 colors. If they're in red, that means that they were people who were selected by the pro football voters. If they're in yellow, they were selected by us. And if they're in orange, they're on both lists to make it easy. So if you're colorblind, I apologize ahead of time. It's just the easiest way for all of us to see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for those wondering, why are they talking about Peanut Tillman? That's why.
Yeah. And I'm in the 3s. I'm almost ready to go. So if anyone else wants to introduce themselves, I need like 1 more minute here.
Yeah, actually, so Paul, since we've got you, Paul had to join us. He can't call in, but he's messaging through. Actually, I don't know this. Paul, what is your fan base? Imagine he'll type that in.
He's a Cowboys fan.
He's a Cowboys fan. All right.
Yes. He's in the same province as you, Kirk.
No, it could been in Manitoban soon.
Well, I think he's from Hamilton, like around the Hamilton area.
Nice.
Right, Paul?
Yeah, eventually we'll.
Yeah, it says Cowboys
his accent's thicker than
77.
yours too, by the way.
Nice. All right, yeah, maybe we'll just continue with introductions. Vinny, you're up.
Yeah, I'm Vinny Los Menuso. I'm no longer in college. I just graduated, so good for me. I've been doing a lot of the podcasts with Kirk since 2019. I've also been doing vlogs for Zenny62. Mostly been doing a lot of freelance work. Also making sure that LinkedIn comes my way and I get another pay raise. I don't know. I've just been mostly doing a lot of Hall of Fame stuff on the side as well. This is what I really want to do in life. Just be a big voice for Halls of Fame in general, and of course, not just for the players, the contributors as well.
Mm-hmm. Dan Kelly.
Thanks for having me back, guys. I'm Dan Kelly. I am in Boston. I'm a big Patriots fan, freelance sports writer. I've formerly written for a couple of people. And I'm psyched to be here. I had a lot of fun on the first show. I will try to keep my comments a little more limited this time, since we have fewer Patriots candidates, and make sure everyone gets to speak.
We tried. Bill.
Yes, thank you very much, gentlemen. Bill Carroll. I like Vinny. I blog for Vinny62, or vlog, I guess, for Zenny62 Media. I run the Consensus Draft Services scouting team. I write for Around the Block Sports, particularly their Black history part of Around the Block Sports, or I guess Black sports history, or however you want to put it. And I also write for Nuts and Bolts Sports. Probably some other people I'm forgetting as well.
Okay. Ted
Crockett. I am a veteran. I am working on a doctorate degree in sport administration. I help homeless veterans, super fan, Michigan fan, and unfortunately a starving Lions fan. And doesn't look like we'll have too many of those to discuss today, but glad to be here, and nice meeting everybody.
Jeremy
McFarland from the Football's Family Podcast. I'm a Titans fan, so you'll see where I lean today, and I'm glad to be back.
All right. Chris.
Hi, this is Chris Meridian. I'm here in Wisconsin representing Packers, and not really a blogger, vlogger, or podcaster or anything like that. Just a fan of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and just fascinated by the whole process of the selections and who gets in and who doesn't, and here to lend a voice to a couple of deserving candidates, I feel.
Sounds good. Dan Newman.
Hi, Dan Newman. I co-host with my brother the Hello Old Sports podcast on the Sports History Network, which is a network that a few other folks on here are a part of as well. And I am a proud and currently suffering New York Giants fan.
Tom.
Hello, everyone. My name is Thomas Hall. I go by Tom. I'm a Broncos fan. I write for Mile High Huddle, which is on Sports Illustrated, Fan Nation. And this is my, I think, 4th or 5th time doing this with you guys. So I don't have any Broncos that are in the running today. So I may play spoiler to some of the candidates I don't like.
And Dave.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Dave Whitlock. I'm down here in Houston, Texas, so representing Texas. I'm a Houston Texans fans of sorts. Was more of an Oilers fan back in the day, but they abandoned me to Tennessee, and just glad to be here. Writing my Twitter handles on there. All Dave on Sports is my Twitter handle, and a blog I write, kind of a weekly column.
Mm-hmm. Darren.
Hi, Darren Hayes of pigskindispatch.com, the Pigskin Dispatch podcast, Jersey Dispatch, and the all-new Orville Mulligan Sports Writer audio drama that's coming out. I'm from Western Pennsylvania and a Steelers fan. I'm glad to be back.
Okay. Oh, and I see Wayne's here.
Finally got in. I couldn't get in on my PC. It's asking me for a passcode, but we'll go by hook or crook. Good afternoon, everyone. Wayne Mabry, 30-year ambassador for the Raiders as a Violator, 2021 Hall of Fame class inductee from Ford, and 52-year Raiders fan. So everyone, welcome.
And a published author now.
Condolences.
And a published author. Oh yeah,
And Wayne, my condolences.
Yeah,
My
we're kind of
condolences,
like
Wayne.
we're kind of soaking up that news, man. It's unreal. We just lost Bruce Davis, a few days ago, and so I don't know if Al's calling us all home or what, but let's get busy.
It was hard for me too, even making that vlog as well. Very, very sad. My heart goes out to everyone that knew him and just knew about him, or even just got into it because of him, because he really was, I think legend isn't even the right word to use to describe.
No, iconic would kind of be a better term for him.
Yeah, definitely.
Football fan has to know John Madden.
So let's dedicate this show to the memory of John Madden. I think every one of us in different capacities grew up with watching him coach, listening to him, playing the video game that bears his name. This is about as devastating as it gets. So this one's for you, John.
Hey, and just by the way, Tom, you're a little soft when you're talking, so you might want to move the microphone a little closer, just so you know.
All right. You just let me know when it's better.
That's much better than it was a second ago.
All right.
So
I'm still working out the quirks with this new thing. So you just let me know, and if you can hear me now, that's great.
I'll let you know. I just want to make sure. So,
Great.
all right, I finally got my act together here. So I'll put the sheet up for everybody. So share screen. All right. So let me split it here. I'll split from there. All right. So
we have this cutting edge technology of Excel.
It's Excel. Yes, I know.
Well, Evan and I are not sort of the co-host of the binational Hall of Fame related podcast, where I think we're number one on that specific demographic on iTunes. I think
we definitely have the top U.S. Barbados sports podcasts and on our network. So anyway, so there were 18 votes. 18 people voted on this. Nobody was unanimous, which was interesting, but everybody had at least one vote. So the top, we had 2 with 15. I'll read out for people who are not able to see this. 2 with 15 were Patrick Willis and Tony Baselli. With 14, we had DeMarcus Ware, Zach Thomas, Steve Tasker, Reggie Wayne, and Torrey Holt. With 13, we had Rondé Barber. 12 for Jared Allen, Richard Seymour, and Willie Anderson and Andre Johnson. Nobody with 11. 10 for Leroy Butler. 9 for Kevin Williams. 8 for Devin Hester. 7 for Ricky Waters, Sean Alexander, and Henry Ellard. 6 for Rodney Harrison. 5 for Sam Mills, friend of the show, Richmond Webb, and Anquan Bolden. 4 for Darren Woodson, Vince Wilfork, Cornelius Bennett, Pat Swilling, Donovan McNabb, Fred Taylor, Steve Smith. 3 for Bryant Young, Robert Mathis, Willie McGinnis, Steve Wisniewski, and Eddie George. 2 for Peanut Tillman and Eric Allen, and 1 for Heinz Ward. So that's where we're starting.
I just want to say right up front that I think the Hall of Fame voters got it way off this year. That's all I want to say right up front. I was very disappointed in their selections.
Yeah, I think we talked about at the time that they came up with 3 running backs, none of whom were people who that were people who got close to our list. So
Yeah, it was a sad list, I thought, but that's why we have ours, right?
Of course.
Because we're
If you want
right.
done
and
something
they're
right, if you want something done right, do it yourself.
So how do you want to start this, Kirk? Do you want to start from the bottom or from the top?
Yeah, so let's all look at the top first. Can we agree pretty much unilaterally that if 15 out of 18 of us are looking at Patrick Willis and Tony Baselli, can we just advance them at this stage?
I think I'd say so. I mean, Willis, I think everyone here really wants to see in.
I'm okay with it.
I'm okay with Willis. I'm very excited about Baselli.
If someone has like a major case that they want to state against them, then yeah, sure. But I mean, both those guys got most of our votes. So
I voted for neither of them, but I have no objection.
Okay. Yeah, so that's our first two that we're going to put in. Staying at the top, we've got 5 with 14. Same question.
Well, we're electing 15, correct?
Right.
Yes.
Unless we have what happened to us last time, where we just
had a tie.
We were kind of deadlocked, and the Pro Football Hall of Fame did exactly what we did. So I think we inspired them.
I like that.
I like to think so.
All right. So if we have 5 with 14, that's already 7 out of the 15 spaces taken.
Right. So then we can, I think, now look at eliminations, unless there's any objection to those ones. And I'm really happy for Tasker here on this. I hope this bodes well.
Then I guess I won't have any objection.
I will reserve my negative Tasker comments for later.
Yeah, I guess I'll hold off on that if you're really excited, Kirk.
I did not. I did not vote for Baselli or Tasker. I don't know. I don't necessarily feel strong enough to campaign to eliminate either one of them.
Okay.
But I guess I'm just going to avoid giving this speech too frequently. So I'll just say up front, when I was really looking at my final list today, at the end of the day, only 5 of these guys are getting in, correct?
15. Well, yeah, at the very end of the day. Yeah, right. Yeah, 5
in.
for sure. Yeah.
Because then when I was looking at it, I would say for me personally, I had 4 locks already and sort of a wild card between maybe 5 guys for the last spot. And so I don't feel as strongly this time around because there are a lot of guys that you could make an argument for that I don't think deserve to be in the top 5, but maybe deserve to be in the top 15.
Yeah, and I guess I don't have a beef with Steve Tasker himself. I think he was an incredible player. I guess my feeling is more towards special teams, and I know it's the third, unit, and they're important, but most special teamers don't get on the field that much. I mean, if we're voting for a punter, like they affect a game maybe once every 10 games realistically, when everybody else is on the field for most of the plays. Like the Hall of Famers that are on defense are there, they're playing 90% of the defensive plays. So I lean towards not putting special teamers in it unless they are a kick returner who are the best of the best. So, I mean, for example, we have someone on the list, Hester, who obviously was the best of the best, made impact plays when he touched the ball. But at the same time, how much impact did he have every single game? And that's why I always kind of lean towards not having special teamers on there. I would say Steve Tasker is probably one of the best kind of special teamers out there, but I mean, is he making impact plays enough to put me over the top on special teams? That's the only thing that I have against Steve Tasker. Not that he's not a great player and, not deserving of the Hall of Fame, but
what I'll say in Steve Tasker's defense is he was more than just a special teamer. Unlike Devin Hester, who never really managed to become a true wide receiver, Tasker was a pretty darn good wide receiver. Now, he was on a really stacked offense where, he was usually a 3 or 4th option because, James Lofton, Hall of Famer, Andre Reed, Hall of Famer. So Steve Tasker is never going to be able to climb above those two, but he made contributions as a wide receiver. A lot of key catches, if you play now where slot receivers are, is he not better than Cole Beasley? I would say he's a better version of Cole Beasley, but he just played in an era before slot receivers really got featured.
Slot receivers didn't really get big into the 2000s, really. Wes Welker was one of the more pioneers of it when Belichick used it when that on their undefeated season before, the Giants, of course, but still, it didn't really get big until then. So Tasker was often used in the special teams role, but it's not like he wasn't very dominant in those areas too. I would say when it comes to someone like Tasker, I think the main reason why I'm really big on the idea of special teamers is even though I know their contribution is smaller compared to that to an offensive member or a defensive member, it's that, when I see the way that coaches talk about special teamers, it's always a lot larger than the way that the media or even fans feel about them. Yes, their contribution is not much as an offensive player or a defensive player, but considering they make so much the impact on something like a special teams, Belichick even mentions it. That's a big reason as to why I'm much more of a proponent of a special teams, addition beyond just the offensive players or the defensive players. And Tasker is definitely on the top of that list.
I agree with that.
I'll weigh in a little bit about Tasker. First, Tasker he wasn't much of a receiver, actually. He only had 51 catches for 779 yards. Devin Hester trumped that easily, 255 catches, 3,311 yards. So
but that's more due to the difference in the eras than the difference in the player.
Absolutely.
it may have been, but the stats are the stats. They're still.
No, I'm not arguing that the stats are the stats, but I watched both guys play, and I promise you that Tasker was the better receiver. I watched Devin Hester's entire career. I watched Steve Tasker's entire career. Tasker was so much better at every part of being a receiver than Devin Hester that I understand. Trust me, I know the numbers. I also know the players.
And I get that, but we definitely have to look at Tasker as being not as much of an impact. Again, special teamers, I'm with Tom. Like, they just don't make the impact compared to someone else.
I'm agreeing with you. He didn't get my vote. I didn't vote for him, but in defense of him.
Yeah, let me finish.
Yeah, good.
The point being, I have an issue with somebody who's a part-time player against somebody else who should get in maybe, but you're going to take away a spot and give it to a part-time player. I don't see Tasker being one of the top 5 guys from this class, or even top 15, or even maybe top 50, just because of his contributions. His approximate value is 7. He averages 1 tackle a game is pretty much what he did on special teams.
Right.
And I can't give him a spot at the expense of anybody else on the list.
Yeah, so I agree with you.
We agree.
Yeah.
He didn't get my vote. I think Henry Eller too much more deserved.
Well, and I think it's because he's going as a special teamer. I just my issue isn't that I don't believe that he should be considered. I just don't think we should put him through unanimously when we have someone on this list that, I'm looking at Rondé Barber, who we're not putting through as a unanimous decision, but his impact to the actual game day in and day out with his sacks, interceptions were much higher than Steve Tasker. All I'm saying is let's have more of a discussion about Steve Tasker than just putting through unanimously because we all said, oh yeah, we think he should get in as a special teamer.
Okay,
but let's discuss him is all I'm saying.
So let's then hold off Tasker and advance the other 4.
That's all I'm saying is let's just let's not put him through unanimously. I know people like Steve Tasker, but I just
before we do, does anyone have an argument
other candidates?
Sorry, does anyone have an argument against where Zach Thomas, Reggie Wayne, or Torrey Holt? I know that I can't remember what's his name. The Bears fan is not here at the moment, and he hates Reggie Wayne with passion.
It's Jack.
Jack just absolutely despises Reggie Wayne. I don't know what Reggie Wayne did to his family at some point, but he feels about Reggie Wayne the way I feel about Hines Ward.
My personal opinion, it's called Super Bowl 41.
It could be, but but does anyone have any arguments against where Thomas, Wayne, or Holt?
No,
I don't have any arguments. Although, if you wanted one person that didn't make it, who was my big fan of, is put Reggie Wayne next to Rod Smith's numbers, and then we'll have a discussion.
Yeah, I know. We've had that before.
We need to get some wide receivers out of here so we can start getting some deserving candidates in there, I think.
Yeah.
All right. So maybe we work from the bottom.
Yep.
So we've got Hines Ward at 1. I don't recall who voted for him. Does anyone want to make a Hail Mary?
That was me. I won't prolong it too much because I don't think he'll be moving forward, but he had some decent enough numbers, Super Bowl MVP, which you don't have a lot of receivers who won a Super Bowl MVP. I remember watching the inductions, which I guess last year would have been the combined 20 and 21 inductions, and more than one inductee saying that they thought that Hines Ward should be in the Hall of Fame one day. So maybe I kind of had that fresh in my mind as well. So it was kind of a combination of a bunch of different things that he was one of the last ones that I put on there, but I like his sort of general resume, between, some decent numbers, some Pro Bowls, a couple of championships, Super Bowl MVP. I don't know. He's shown more than some of the other guys for the top 15 for me.
Those were Steelers inductees that were mentioning his name. I remember that.
Absolutely.
There was 4 of them, by the way.
They were pushing for him big time.
5.
You bet.
Like Hines Ward's name was mentioned more than anyone else, and like there was like one mention for Harold Jackson. Like, bro, come on.
I don't get the fascination with Hines Ward. I just don't get it. You guys have heard me rant about this here and on Twitter. I don't see it. I just don't get it.
All right. So
I will say, out of all the wide receivers that are left, I posted something on Twitter just asking if anyone had strong opinions. Hines Ward was the only person that nobody spoke up for. But I will say all of the remaining wide receivers have unbelievably comparable stats. They're in terms of just lifetime numbers, receptions, yards, touchdowns. All of the guys really have similar stats. So it really comes down to, with the wide receivers, is your personal preference championships, or is it Pro Bowls or all pros or highest peak? So I think a lot just comes down to personal preference. I personally didn't vote for Hines Ward, just because I don't think he's one of the top 3 wide receivers remaining. And I couldn't really promote more than that. But I do think with a lot of the guys at this point, they're all unbelievable players. A lot comes down to personal preference with the bottom half.
Okay. So can we safely eliminate Hines at this stage?
Yes. I think so. I don't think anyone's really going to. Yeah, it's like there's so many wide receivers here anyway. Like pushing Hines Ward just gives like shot liver.
Sorry about that. I got him muted ahead of time. So
okay. So same question. We've got 2 votes for Peanut and Eric Allen. 2 very, very good players. I'm really curious to see if anyone wants to make an impassioned plea for either of them. I know Jack, if he was here.
So I'll make Jack's argument again, since he's not here. That Peanut Tillman is basically the fact that there's a move in the NFL still named after him, the Peanut Punch. He was responsible for a ridiculous number of fumbles caused for his position, and was one of the stalwarts on a series of, well, not championship. They did go to the Super Bowl once. Very, very good Bears teams. Is basically the argument for Peanut Tillman. That I'm sure he'd make a much more impassioned plea than I am, but essentially that's the argument.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jack would definitely be the one that would be pushing pretty hard for him, especially with the Peanut Punch itself. Though I'm not really as passionate for Peanut Tillman. Like, he just feels like a kind of guy to me that's like, even if I was to list my number of finalists out of the ones that we did, I wouldn't really go for Tillman, especially when you have several other members of the secondary that I would say contributed a bit more to the overall game and their play on the field in comparison. No offense to Tillman, but compared to the other ones, he kind of gets the short end of the stick there.
Well, arguably even in the same conversation here with Eric Allen, who I think.
Oh yeah, definitely.
No, I think in this coming from somebody that's been Bears fan forever, I think the problem with Peanut Tillman is this. there's that lack of like truly being at the top of the heap. The move being named after him and being mimicked is great, but not everybody that has a move or something thought of associated with them makes him a Hall of Famer. That's what the Bears team during his time. When you talk about that decade, who do you think about with that Bears defense? You think about Urlacher, Hall of Famer. You think about Briggs, who is a significantly better player at his position by relation, who is borderline at best. Like, is Briggs even on our list here? Like, I mean, that's the problem. So as much as I love Peanut as a Bears fan, but like when I look at Eric Allen, he was just a better player at his position for a longer period of time. Like, to me, is a different conversation.
Oh, definitely.
Peanut's the perfect example of the Hall of Very Good, probably a little bit disrespected within his time, but he was also up against guys like the Ty Laws of the world, the Champ Baileys of the world, and so forth. Like, we have to start looking and saying, okay, where does this guy stack up relative to? And if you start putting in a Peanut Tillman, at this time at least, like, you talk about in the same class of an Eric Allen, let alone somebody like a Rondé Barber. No, like, if you watch him during that time, you can clearly see the difference. I love Peanut, but I have to be realistic here.
Oh, Jeff, I was just gonna say, how you doing, man? Like, you just came
finally
on.
got
How
out
you
of
been?
14 hours after it started, finally out of work for today. So I'm good, Vincent.
Doing good. It's also finally great to finally speak to you after knowing you since like 2015, I think.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, about time, dude.
Watch out, world. Vinny's got his college degree now. There ain't no stopping him.
Let's see how that goes with there. But always great to have you on, man.
Yeah,
I gotta say, you definitely got me very motivated, and I really appreciate that, Jeff. Don't worry.
You bet. Yeah, sorry. I'd have been on about 10 or 15 minutes later, but honestly, when I finally got off the work laptop and I saw Madden had passed, I got sucked into the kind of the Twitter hole for a minute.
Yeah, we were talking about him before too. Do we have so Tillman and Allen? From what I'm hearing from everyone, there's not really that huge a push if they were left off.
I'll say I voted for both of them, so I'm half of those 4 votes. Yeah, and I'll let it go because it's we're moving on.
My only thing with Tillman, even over Eric Allen, I didn't vote for either one. I'll scratch him, but for next time, just think about when you look at Rod Woodson, the amount of impact plays he had. When you look at interceptions and forced fumbles, I mean, those are impact plays. Tillman is right up there with him. He didn't have as many interceptions, but he had twice as many forced fumbles. And you're making an impact in the game. It's not a big interception guy, but you got to count impact plays. So I'm willing to scratch him, but just remember that we should have a different conversation when it comes to cornerbacks, because I mean, Tillman made so significant impact on that defense. Just wasn't on interceptions, which when you look at a cornerback, that's what people want to look at. They want to say, oh, how many interceptions does he have? But
he also benefited greatly from a system that allowed him to freelance. I mean, you talk about playing the cover 2 system. So I think about that when I say, I think it was like 38 career interceptions, 44 forced fumbles, something along that line.
That's right.
Forced fumbles number, he still only led the league once, but doing that as a corner, like that is a testament to just how great he was in that respect.
Right.
That is one respect of the overall picture.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you, as a Bears fan watching him for a decade, I always thought he was better suited to play 3 safety. I always thought Lovie Smith and the Bears did him a bit of a disservice because with his physicality, with his kind of ball hawking nature, they did him somewhat of a disservice because he would get roasted at times on the outside. There's just no other way to say it. I
remember some of those.
Like when you talk about like a Rod Woodson was an all generation. You're talking about, you create an all-time team. He might be one of the 2 or 3 corners along like Train Lane and Deion Sanders. Like a lot of people would take him over Deion because he could actually tackle and be a shutdown corner. Just ask him to tackle Barry Sanders on the turf at Pittsburgh.
Before we move on, Wayne, as the resident Raiders expert, do you have anything on Eric Allen?
Yeah, got the chance to watch him play when he was with us, and also in Philly. Hated him then. He was like that veteran leadership that we needed at that time in the backfield. So he got my vote definitely because of he kept his nose clean. He was a hard-nosed player and took very few games off. So that's kind of where I kind of rate players, their durability, their availability. So yeah, he definitely got my vote.
One question about Eric Allen, because I think he was what, a 6-7 time Pro Bowler, and I know that's not the ultimate measure, but most of his peak years were in Philly.
Right.
Like when you think about that Philly defense, you know, before he left, obviously you think Reggie White won. Then you probably think about what guys like Jerome Brown before he passed away.
Yeah.
You know, when you think about that, Buddy Ryan, it was a great defense, but they didn't win anything at the end of the day. Like, does Eric Allen belong in the same likes of somebody, let's say, like an Aeneas Williams?
Well, if you're talking about him as an individual player, yes. I mean, because
Tell me about that,
you
Bill.
mentioned the same breath with guys like Ty Law. I mean, he was as good as, he just wasn't on as good a team.
Aeneas Williams. Yeah, he was on that Rams team that went to the Super Bowl, but you know, he never won anything either as a player. I mean, then again, Eric Allen, was he on the Raiders team that went to the Super Bowl that year in 2002, or like, I don't think he was. I think that was like just before.
He retired in 01.
Oh, one.
So
yeah.
just 1 year before.
He had bad
Mike
timing.
Wisniewski.
He had bad timing.
but he was a top 5 corner, top 5 or 6 corner for almost a dozen years, and that should mean something.
Right. So in the interest of time here, it seems like everyone's not that excited about moving Tillman forward. Should we at least leave Eric Allen on here till we get through the threes?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Dump him as well.
I'd say so. I just keep him on there.
Sure, please.
Okay.
All right. So we'll keep Eric Allen at least till we get through the threes, and then we can vote at that point.
So
right?
maybe Evan, let's do the threes now. Now, I think with this group, we should only advance 2.
Include Eric Allen in this group.
Right, exactly. So that means that we're now discussing, we're going to save 2 out of Bryant Young, Robert Mathis, Willie McGinnis, Steve Wisniewski, Eddie George, Eric Allen. I know that there's a couple very passionate people about Willie McGinnis. We've got someone else who saw a lot of Steve Wisniewski. Eddie George is a very interesting one, I think, to us. We did not have him on our semifinalists last year, but we have some new people here who might bring in a different perspective. Also with Robert Mathis, not someone we picked. So is there anyone who would like to sort of really discuss why Mathis or Eddie George belongs, or Bryant Young, because that's another person that we didn't select.
I'm curious to understand about Eddie George. Sorry, Ted, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I just think Mathis has a decent shot of being elected one day. I was a little surprised that he made the top 25 right off the bat. I think obviously he's kind of in Freeney's shadow. He certainly will have my vote here to advance. But in terms of Eddie George, yeah, he's just, I don't believe how he got this far. So that's all I'll say.
I guess here would be my question with Eddie George. Like when you look at his career yards per attempt, I think it's 3.5, 3.6. You guys had to fact check. When you think about a running back, he was a high volume guy. I'm not saying he wasn't important to Tennessee along the year. He was a big name, Heisman Trophy winner, Ohio State, part of that 99 team that went to the Super Bowl. But when you look at the actual numbers, are they really that impressive? Like there's a bit of accumulation there based off of opportunities and carries, where I'm looking at Wisniewski was absolutely one of the best of his generation and criminally underrated.
Yep.
Like even Eric Allen, like if I look by comparison, I know it's easier to quantify what a running back does. I think in this case, that actually hurts Eddie George a little bit, because where are the numbers that justify it relative to others? Like even if you're comparing like him and a Ricky Waters, there is no comparison.
Yeah.
Or even Otis Anderson, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get, somebody said I don't get the fascination. Here's the one I don't get the fascination with. And he was a terrific player, but Hall of Fame, I mean, once again, Hall of Very Good, yes.
I would say, like, when it comes to Eddie George, like, I mean, when I was looking at the running backs that people were mentioning of, he was like the last guy on my mind. Like, I mean, everyone knows this, that the one I was definitely thinking of was Sean Alexander. And he was like, out of all of them, Alexander, despite being the one that all of us were all big on, he was the one that they were not big on. I'm like, bro, like this guy won an MVP on the cover of Madden, 100 touchdowns. And it's like, but Eddie George, I guess, is a name that stands on, and it just doesn't make any sense to me, in my opinion.
Everything we're saying about Eddie George, we can pretty much say about Fred Taylor.
Basically, at this point.
So my 2 cents on this group is my preference were actually the two guys that are not finalists, McGinnis and Wisniewski. I was shocked that with Wisniewski, Reuben Brown, Jeff Saturday, Logan Mankins, not one interior offensive lineman made the finals. It was a great group, and none of them made it. I don't know if they just canceled each other out. I'm a huge Logan Mankins fan. I think Wisniewski is probably the best of the bunch, and he got left out. I also think McGinnis, based on his contributions to a winning team, his versatility, and his postseason performances, gets my vote as well. And again, it becomes personal preference. I'm admittedly a huge Patriots fan, but a lot of the debate becomes, are we considering these guys only because they're on good teams, or were they on good teams because those teams had such good players like him? So I'm not that high on Bryant Young, Eddie George, or Eric Allen. Nothing personal against any of them. I think Mathis, to me, I do think he'll probably get in eventually. He's, I believe, the all-time forced fumbles leader.
He's the all-time
But
leader.
again, when you think about that defense and you think about trying to stop the Colts, you're trying to stop Dwight Freeney. He's facing your left tackle. He's getting the extra tight end or the running back. And you have Mathis, who's a beast of a player, coming in from the other side. So I think just because of how dominant Freeney was, it actually takes away from him a little bit there. So my 2 cents on that group is I'm big on McGinnis, big on Wisniewski, and I like Mathis. The other three, I think we're all great players that don't deserve to advance.
Hey, Dan, question for you about McGinnis. I'm trying to understand, like, to me, I agree with Wisniewski. I think wasn't he second team all decade in the 90s?
Yeah, from the voters, yeah, he was.
Like if we're talking about, sometimes it can be hard because there's subjective, it's media stuff, especially quantifying what interior linemen do.
Of course, yeah.
He was viewed over the course of a decade as first or second team. And part of the first team of the 90s was Larry Allen. I would have a lot of passion about him. I think he's been criminally underrated. I'm not understanding the Willie McGinnis love. I think he had 1 10-sack season. Agree, a part of those Patriots teams, but even when you think about those defenses, you think about guys like Seymour and Law first.
Yep. And I think more than two guys from that defense that won 3 Super Bowls deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. I think Rodney Harrison deserves to be in.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's necessarily a limit. I wouldn't put him over Richard Seymour. I'm actually shocked that anybody didn't vote for Richard Seymour, to be honest. Seeing him further down the list than some of these other guys is a real head scratcher to me. So I do, and that's why I'm not getting on my soapbox too much about him this year. I'm happy that I helped campaign to get him into the semifinals. He's the all-time postseason sack leader, all-time Super Bowl sack leader. He won 3 Super Bowls. He's not going to land on an all-decade team because he played from the core of his career from about 94 to 2005. So he's one of those tweeners.
The Reuben Browns, I call them.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're going to be on a all half decade team, I guess, 5 to 5. But he also did things like, if you look at the Patriots' first Super Bowl win, his job was just to hit Marshall Faulk every play. So at the end of the day, what are his stats for that game? Not eye popping, but what were Marshall Faulk's stats for that game? And Marshall Faulk was undoubtedly the biggest offensive weapon in football at that point. And Willie McGinnis' lone job was just to hit him. And he wore him down, and the Patriots beat them. The Rams were unbeatable in that 2001 Super Bowl. So to me, just having watched him, and I obviously haven't watched a ton of football, but watching him throughout his career, he just did all of those little things that when he was gone, and now, watch the Patriots now, it really stands out, where just a guy that sets the edge, makes the tackle, forces him back inside for Brewski to make the tackle, or, someone else to pick up an easy tackle because he has nowhere else to go. Those are all the things that contribute to winning. And I think, especially in a system defense, winning can't be overlooked. And the
Well-
Patriots dynasty has been overlooked by the Hall of Fame, with the exception of Ty Law so far.
Well, I think here's the thing though. Ty Law was a better player at his position than McGinnis. What is it his? I hope we can.
I
agree.
don't disagree. And I
So-
think Law deservedly got in first. I think Seymour will deservedly go in second. And
Yeah.
I think Rodney Harrison and Willie McGinnis are also deserving of consideration.
I look at McGinnis though, and what you're describing to me, like different positions, so humor me. But I hear a lot of Hines Ward. Like I'll do a lot of the things that help you win, which is great and makes you like a key cog, like leader, role player. But there is a piece to the Hall of Fame of like being the absolute very best of what you did. And I don't think you think of Willie McGinnis in that same light as the very best at what he did for an extended period of time.
I would say though, when it comes to someone like Willie McGinnis,
I'm sorry, Vinny, what was that?
I was going to say, when it comes to someone like Willie McGinnis, like what Dan was saying, I've noticed with a lot of what Patriots fans have noticed, and also in general, and I do understand that sentiment of feeling like the idea that, oh, the only reason why the Patriots are good is because of Belichick and Brady and Kraft as the ownership group. But when I look at these Patriots team, I mean, when you're the most dominant team in the past 20 years, there's far more to you than just, an owner, a coach, a quarterback, just a couple pieces. When you look at a team like the Cowboys or the Packers and the Steelers, I mean, those are teams that often, are very jacked. They were very, dispersed throughout the entire roster. But the Patriots, the thing with them is that they oftentimes were forced to sacrifice personal success in order to achieve the ultimate team goal. So I don't blame people for really advocating for someone like a McGinnis or, someone like even other guys like a McCourty or Wilfork, or hell, even an Edelman. It doesn't shock me because a lot of people, deservedly so, look at other teams in the past and they kind of they compare it to a team like the Patriots, who one can argue has been more dominant during that stretch compared to some of these other teams, especially considering the free agency era. So I don't blame people for wanting to see a lot of Patriots in. I mean, hell, frankly, I want to see a good number of Patriots in. I'm down for Skarnecki even making it because of how dominant those lines are. But I think when it comes to like the Patriots themselves, it's more difficult because you still have that narrative. And, in order for that narrative to really be squashed, you really got to emphasize the importance of what those players did, especially at the highest level. So I do agree with Dan that it is important to focus on what a lot of these guys did at the highest level, because that was their ultimate goal at the end of the day. And considering they were all team first and personal achievement seconds, that's a big reason why.
All right, so I think we should move on because let's keep this under 2 hours.
Yeah, we're almost an hour in and we're debating the twos and threes. So
This sounds like work now. Can we get it moving?
yeah. All right. So are we all voting for 3 and taking the top 2, Kirk, or is there voting for 2?
We're just going to vote for 2. Everyone's will select two people, and the top 2 will advance to the 4s. And I think when we get to the 4s, again, just like Evan said, we will try to keep it. Maybe we'll just sort of like time around, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I think the getting through these parts are going to be a little more there. These are the people who need a little more debate, I think, than the people at the top, but we'll see.
Right. But we still should.
All right. So I'm just going to go through in order. I have you guys on the screen. So we'll start with, and I just usually go last, just because I'm doing everything, but Kirk, go ahead.
I'm advancing Wisniewski and Mathis.
Wisniewski and Mathis. Ted?
Exactly the same.
Sorry, we're going to do this after this. Jeremy?
Eddie George and Willie McGinnis.
George and McGinnis. Chris?
I'm voting Eric Allen and Steve Wisniewski.
Allen and Wisniewski. Vinny?
Eric Allen and Steve Wisniewski.
Dan. Oh, sorry, Daniel. Excuse me, because we got Dan and a Daniel. So Dan. Yo. Damn it. Daniel Glenn Newman. There we go.
Which one am I?
Oh,
Full
they
name
went
there.
full government.
Full name, yeah. Well, Wisniewski and McGinnis.
Wisniewski and McGinnis. Dave Whitlock.
I'm going to vote for Eric Allen and only Eric Allen. The rest are garbage.
Wow. Fair enough. My
He
goodness.
said, David, don't call me Jason Whitlock. I'm in
Savage.
the hot fire.
Nacho Man Randy Savage.
Yeah, it must just be the last name Whitlock with controversial takes. Dan Kelly.
I go McGinnis and Wisniewski.
Tom Hall.
I'm going with Winooski and Young.
Bill Carroll.
Eric Allen and Robert Mathis.
Allen and Mathis. Darren Hayes.
I'm going to do the same. Mathis and Allen.
Mathis and Allen. Wayne.
Wisniewski and Mathis.
Is that Pat Lawrence? Is he just typing?
No, it's Paul Lawrence. He said Allen
sorry.
Wisniewski.
He said Allen and Wisniewski.
Allen and Wisniewski. And Jeff, you said you want the same?
Yes, sir. Vinny and I are aligned in thought. You should be terrified, Mr. Hofstra.
Right. And I actually would put McGinnis and Wisniewski on this. So looks like we're actually Eric Allen and Wisniewski are advancing.
Cool. Good.
So let me just copy this so I have it down the bottom. And then we will adjust here. All right. Do you want to start talking about the fours as I'm updating this?
Yeah. So with again, for those listening, the fours are Darren Woodson, Vince Wilfork, Cornelius Bennett, Pat Swilling, Donovan McNabb, Fred Taylor, and Steve Smith. A very interesting group. If I could just sort of like start with that. And we talked about this last time. I'm just going to bring this up again since we've got some newer people here. Why does everyone hate Donovan McNabb so much?
This crap goes back to draft day.
Yeah.
You know, when the dopes in Philly wanted Ricky and didn't understand what Donovan was coming out of Syracuse. But same thing as like the Browns. Like this even goes back to the bias of the Browns eliminated him early in the process and were choosing between Tim Couch and Achilles Smith. And that's why they've been the skid marks of the league for most of the past 2 decades. You know, but I say that to say, if he won a Super Bowl, the conversation I think with him would be very different.
100% different.
I actually honestly think if his 2-minute drill in the Super Bowl they lost the Patriots were better and he lost, it just looked like he was throwing up on the field and moving in slow motion. And it's almost the same thing as Cam Newton not jumping on that fumble in the Super Bowl. It became a career-defining view of the player. And I honestly think that still follows him around.
I think part of the problem though for McNabb, like there's a bit of that is a bias thing. This even goes back to the Rush Limbaugh days.
Right.
That was why did they even have him on?
They knew what they were getting into, and then they got the blowback. I think for McNabb, what hurts him is a couple of things. Never led the league in touchdown passes. I think he had 130 touchdown pass season. Never threw for 4,000 yards. Like when you look at some of those metrics that started to matter more at the quarterback position come to the 2000s, he just really didn't have them. Now, part of that is he's caught in that weird crossover of, you know, the 90s, you started to see some growth and explosion in the passing game, but obviously it's not at 2020s level. McNabb's kind of in that middle bucket too, but he was one of the absolute best at his position for an extended period of time.
And for a couple of those seasons, his best wide receiver was James Thrash.
Correct. Yeah, like the Pinkstons, the Thrashes, the Freddie Mitchells of the world. My God.
I also think it's got a lot to do with the coach. He makes the quarterbacks a little bit better. Andy Reid did a great job with McNabb, but McNabb he never won a Super Bowl, which would have put him over the top, and he was never incredible in the statistical area that would put him over the top. So he's one of those kind of guys that you're thinking, what is it that would make you want him to be in the Hall of Fame? It's just not, there's nothing you can point to that says, wow, yeah, he went to NFC championship games, but
5 of them.
5 of them.
nothing that you can say that you're like, wow, he did something spectacular. It's too blah, I think.
The only wow metric he had, and since the game has changed, that is not as wow as it was his touchdown interception ratio. In his era, a wow touchdown interception ratio. But now that it's so much easier to complete passes, it's no longer as wow as it once was.
And I think, Thomas, you've got a good point there too, is that like if I look just from eyeball test as a player, like as a talent, he was better than Eli Manning, period.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
at the end of the day, Eli's got the 2
That's right.
clutch playoff runs, which is really all he's got his hat on when you look statistically. It's not that great.
Right.
Got those 2, and that carries a lot of weight in this conversation. Whereas McNabb, yeah, he's got a bunch of NFC championship game appearances, but the one Super Bowl that people think about more Terrell Owens' performance coming off of the broken leg than they do think McNabb with the dry heat.
And let's be honest here. I mean, he didn't play in the 80s. He played in the 2000s. I mean, it's not like he was playing in a non-passing league. I mean, 84 is when they started to pass more than they ran. So it's not like this is from the olden days. His stats should be more wow than they are. I think that's why everybody's kind of lukewarm on McNabb.
I think there's another reason too, beyond McNabb as well. I think when it comes to a lot of people, and I'm saying this as someone in this own field, I also don't think many media people just like him in general. Like I even asked some of my friends from the area. Now, granted, you could say this because, like every city thinks that their team is a bias against them. But it feels like with Philly in particular, it does feel like a lot of the people internalize that the media doesn't like their own guys because they're a bit vocal against them. And I think when it comes to McNabb, some people see it the same way. I mean, whether you think he is playing the field matters or not, at the end of the day, I think a lot of people that do view the collective body in a negative way are going to look at it and view as a reason. Though at the same time, I think putting that aside, when it comes to Philly Eagles quarterbacks, I'd rather have someone like a Cunningham as opposed to a McNabb because of what he was able to accomplish on the field in terms of just being very unique at what he did compared to someone like a McNabb.
That was my thought. Was I couldn't vote for McNabb. I pushed Cunningham a year or 2 ago, and I said, well, I look at the quarterback position and the pipeline that's coming. I just couldn't see McNabb as being as a front runner, and I thought Cunningham should be there, but so I withheld a vote from McNabb.
And McNabb, when he opens his mouth, doesn't do himself any favors either.
Right. That's the other thing. Yeah.
He's not that. I mean, he comes off as not an intelligent person when the quarterback position is supposed to be very cerebral. So, I mean, and not that he isn't. I mean, he just, when he opens his mouth, it seems like, whoa, you can't believe he just said that. And he's, we've been in the media too, which usually helps, but that hasn't helped him. I think
he's very similar to, he's the NFC version of Steve McNair in some ways. Had some good years. Some of the overall statistics aren't like the top, getting kind of at the same time as guys like Peyton and so forth. Well, you figure McNair had a league MVP. McNabb had a league MVP. Each took their team to a Super Bowl. I might say like McNabb was better, but I'm thinking just similar ilk. Like when you look at the quarterback position, the competition's pretty good. And outside of some of the other stuff we've talked about, just looking at the position itself, like maybe there's a time and a place for McNabb someday. But some of the numbers just aren't there. And some of the injuries he had throughout his career took away some of those numbers that could have been there.
I just want to throw in 2 cents on McNabb. I think people are focusing a lot on his negatives, and I don't think he necessarily belongs in the Hall of Fame, but I do think at worst, he is the ceiling for players who don't belong in the Hall of Fame. He has more wins than any quarterback not in the Hall of Fame. And he was probably the best quarterback in the NFC during his entire career. Over the course of his career, he would be the top NFC quarterback. He wasn't Brady, obviously. He wasn't Manning, obviously. Wasn't even Roethlisberger. But like Jeff said, he was better than Eli Manning. but he didn't win a Super Bowl. Never mind Sue. So I just want to say I'm fine with McNabb not getting in. I graduated from college with Donovan McNabb, so I'm very biased. I saw all of his college games. The only time I ever rooted against him was the Super Bowl. And I will say, I think he's a fantastic player that maybe somebody has to be the best player, the best quarterback, not in the Hall of Fame. And it might be him. And maybe that's what he's stuck with, but it's not because he wasn't a great player, because he was an excellent player.
He kind of falls into the Ken Anderson category in some ways.
Sure. Yep.
You know, like I mean, it's always going to be that borderline. You could go either way on them.
Yeah. If you gave him a ring, he's in for either of those guys.
Yeah.
I would agree totally.
All right.
So Dan, first time I saw Don McNabb, I was a graduate assistant at the University of Illinois, and we were recruiting Simeon Rice. So we got Simeon Rice, who was his teammate, and Don was 2 years behind him. And they played both basketball and football together at Mount Carmel.
Mount Carmel, yes.
Yeah. The legendary Frank Lindsay. And it's funny because people talk about like his personality, which I must assume this all happened later. 15-year-old Donovan McNabb was a very bright, friendly, engaging young man. So I must assume that maybe some of his experiences in Philadelphia may have sharpened his hard edges or something. But yeah, I think a combination of things will keep him from ever getting the Hall of Fame, including, once again, the not winning the Super Bowl, being perceived as a guy who didn't rise up, didn't elevate his play in the big moments and all that kind of stuff that sort of dogged him. And then the precipitous drop off, right? He wasn't a guy that had a slight decline, like he fell off a cliff at the end. So I think that all those things probably keep him out.
All right, guys. In an effort to keep moving, that's 10 minutes on a guy I don't think any of us are going to advance. So does anyone have anything on Woodson, Will Fork, Bennett, Swilling, Fred Taylor, or Steve Smith?
I would say that compared to McNabb, I'm pretty sure that a lot of us can go either way with them. I mean, someone like Steve Smith, he's up against other guys that are also coming first year, like Anquan Bolden and, Andre Johnson. But it's, for me personally, even though I'd like to see Steve Smith forward, it's kind of hard for me to really go for him when you also have someone like a Reggie Wayne and a Torrey Holt and an Andre Johnson as well. So I'd say no to him, mainly just because of just how stacked the position is right there, how even Henry Elward you have to deal with.
Agreed.
I would think Swilling would get the most discussion.
I was just about ready to mention Swilling. Sorry. I mean, I don't understand why he doesn't get enough recognition. I mean, really,
because you've already got Ricky Jackson in the Hall of Fame, Sam Mills, part of those Mora defenses. People look and say, as great as those defenses were, what did they win under Mora? I'm not saying it's fair.
It's true.
I'm saying that's the reason.
It is true. It is true. But I mean, you look at his numbers. He was one of the, and in fact, one year he was the best sack artist in the league. And other years he was at the top. I mean, I'm not a passionate Pat Swilling guy, but I don't understand why he gets zero recognition at all. And I totally understand there's the linebackers, the dome patrol, and you got the other two in, but there's also many linebackers on the same team from the Steelers that are in the Hall of Fame. So
as the Saints guy, I didn't vote for him, or Sam Mills for that matter. And I love both of those guys, but realistically, I can't put them in a top 15 over a top 25. Definitely in the top 25. Yeah, definitely. I honestly don't know how Mills somehow surpassed Swilling in terms of momentum.
Story,
USFL, and dying young.
Well, I think that's exactly that last part, Vinny.
Yep,
completely. And
he's a beloved figure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually bigger on Cornelius Bennett than I am on Pat Swilling.
Yeah, like if we talk about the two, because they played in similar eras.
Yeah.
So you like pair Bennett and Swilling, because that might help you a little bit in terms of differentiating the two if there is differentiation to make.
I mean, as the AFC East guy whose team used to and now apparently a gun gets their ass kicked by the Bills. The team that only two players on that defense who you really cared about. I mean, Darryl Talley probably a little bit as well, but it was Bruce Smith and Cornelius Bennett. Those two were the guys. I can't even name the cornerbacks on those Bills teams, but Cornelius Bennett and Bruce Smith were just responsible for so much of my childhood heartache. It's ridiculous. I just think that he is criminally underrated. The fact that he hasn't even, I mean, he's in yellow. That means that we voted him there and he wasn't one of the 26 people they picked from the NFL.
He's the Bill Berge of this era.
Ooh. I was going to say the Clay Matthews Sr., but good analogy with Berge too.
Well, Clay Matthews Sr. at least made the finalists list once.
Well, Bennett also was a semifinalist last year, though.
No, true. But I mean, we're how many years left do we have for Bennett at this point?
He retired in like 2001, I think. 2000.
Yeah.
So we're coming up at the
He
end.
got a couple more years, but he'll be a senior pretty soon. Yeah.
I think Pat Swilling gets helped a lot because he had the bigger sack numbers.
Absolutely. And the defensive player of the year.
Yeah.
That also helps.
I mean, his 1991 was an incredible season. I mean, he was one of the best, if not the best. I mean, they voted him as the best defensive player, but I mean, obviously his 91 was
right.
awesome.
But you can have a great year, but also have like a clearly defined role. Like if I think of Bennett, I think of a better all-around football player, where Pat Swilling was able to have a narrower scope, go after the quarterback, and he was great at that. I'm not saying he wasn't great at that. He's a little underrated with that respect, but Bennett was maybe perhaps a better player against the run, better in coverage.
I'll say that too, but I also say that when the NFL started to pass more, sacks became a more important impact to the game. Now they never won anything, granted. I mean, the Bills made it to Super Bowl. They never really won anything either. But when you look at the impact tackle makes versus a sack, you are stopping the offense. So I put more credence on the ability to sack the quarterback now more than someone who's good at tackling better. That's my personal opinion. I mean, I did an analysis on it where I saw that if a sack occurred on a drive, only 4% ended in points.
I remember when it comes to Bennett, like when he retired, he had the most amount of. I remember when Bennett actually had the most amount of fumble recoveries in history, and even though he never did have any league Defensive Player of the Year awards, he did have twice where he was the AFC's Defensive Player of the Year award twice. So, and I'm not really saying this means anything, but he was basically the reverse Charles Haley in this case because he lost the 4 with the Bills and then he lost the 1 with the Falcons. Not saying that really means anything, but it's something.
Yeah,
I think it's important with the sack stuff, though, Thomas.
What's that?
We have to look at it from the context of the time.
Yeah.
If we start talking about sacks, then you start talking about Gastineau. Like, I mean, at some point in time, and I'm not saying Pat Swilling is a much better player than Mark Gastineau. I'm saying though, when you're looking at it from today's lens, that's tricky. You have to look at it from the lens of the late 80s, early 90s.
Sure.
At that time,
No,
had more impact on his team.
I'm fine with either going or neither of the two going, for sure. I will say that the one person on this list that I think is an injustice being on here, and I'm sorry for any fans of the Jags, Fred Taylor should not be on this list whatsoever. I'm going to say if anyone other than Hines Ward should not be on this list, Fred Taylor is the one. He had a longer career. He stayed durable enough to make it, but almost half of his career, half of his seasons in his career, he didn't even have 1,000 yards. He was a good runner and he made some, he was there long enough, but not one time would you ever consider Fred Taylor being the best running back in the NFL. Not even 1 year, and probably not even in his own conference, maybe not even his own division.
He's not even the first or second best player from Jags offensively.
I don't understand the love for Fred Taylor. I feel like the voters looked at the career rushing leader list, and that's how they narrowed this list of running backs down.
That is exactly how they did it, Tom.
That's all it is. Yeah.
It's that, and there are some running back, people including Jim Brown, who were big fans of his, and I think that helps him as well.
Okay. So
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know. I
Chris
just
wants us to vote on.
Yes, I
this.
do.
Well, hold on. Yeah, I was just gonna say before we get there, or anything on Wilfork or Woodson, just because we haven't discussed them at all.
Personally, I think Wilfork, he's the only player of his position in this group. And when you guys, to me, obviously a little biased, when you guys are talking about Bennett and Swilling, you're talking about Willie McGinnis without championship rings. It's Cornelius Bennett's basically identical, but lost in championships. And Willie McGinnis, which I have no problem with, was already eliminated fairly easily. So to me, Wilfork is a unique player in this group. He's the only one other than Tom Brady that bridged the Patriots championship dynasties. He won one of the first three and one of the second three. And he basically eliminated a portion of the field for the other team and took on multi-blockers, which is the key to the Patriots. You eliminate 2 or 3 guys on your own, and now your other 10 is playing against their 8. So to me, Wilfork is the only guy from this group, despite my love for Donovan McNabb, that I think easily deserves to go through. And I don't feel strongly about anyone else.
I think also too, just to add, correct me if I'm wrong, those who were there on the first one, wasn't Vince our last one eliminated?
I mean last year or this?
That's actually on the
round.
spreadsheet. Hold on.
Yeah.
Because
I remember him doing like super well. Like
And
on our
Dan,
preliminary.
I'll give you this, like, when I look at criminally underrated players, I look at Ted Washington and I look at Vince Wilfork, and I say they're very similar in terms of even like Pro Bowls and all pros. Like the problem sometimes for them is just like interior offensive linemen. Stats don't always do them the most justice. It doesn't always capture the impact. And when you talk about like key cogs in the Patriots machine, like he absolutely was one of them. You know, going back to the days he was drafted 21st overall, I think, in that 2004 draft. And
He was.
Thank goodness for that. At the Ravens trading us so they could draft Chris Redmond.
Man, that's terrible.
Ben Watson was the other pick that draft, and he wasn't too shabby either.
Right.
But if I look at, I think the one thing that actually hurts Wilfork a little bit was that he was at the tail end of that first 3 and at the very beginning of the second 3. So he doesn't have the 3-4 Super Bowl rings that would put him in, no doubt about it. Like if the timing of his career was 2003 to 2016 instead of 2004 to 2016, and he spent his entire career in New England, he's got 4 rings.
Right.
At that point in time, he's probably an unstoppable force meeting the immovable object, and he's in.
It could be worse. It could be Logan Mankins, who's drafted after the 3rd Super Bowl and traded the preseason before the 4th one. So
that is very true. That's bad timing.
So
I'm not going to hold that against Wilfork. I mean, at the same time, when you think about nose tackles during that time, is there anyone else other than Vince Wilfork of the 2000s and other than like Ted Washington maybe that you could really say is really deserving of the Hall of Fame? The answer is no, not really. And
Kevin Williams.
Yeah.
Nose tackles, not pure like defensive tackles.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
When you have pure nose tackles, usually Vince Wilfork's the first one that comes to your mind. And
Casey Hampton's the second in that.
Casey Hampton is another one. But the reason as to why I say Wilfork above is because going with Dan said about the legendary Patriots of that era. When I think of the Patriots, dynasty comparing to both of them, and you are correct that he was at the tail end of the first 3 out of 4, and then was in 2014. Then afterwards, he signed a 2-year deal with the Texans. But I would still say that just alone being the main run stuffer in the NFL during that time, I'd give him the nod. I mean, when I think of those Patriots defensive lines, besides Richard Seymour, I usually think of Vince Wilfork, and like I said, he was the best run stuffer in the league during his time with the Patriots. So yeah.
So I guess I would just ask why Casey Hampton's not on the list. There's very similar career accomplishments. He has a couple of Super Bowls. He was a key cog in those Steelers defense.
I agree with you. He
Right.
should be on this list too. But
Okay,
I think
fair enough.
the reason why Will Fork is here and he's not is, if I'm being honest, like I think it's also his name. I think
Yes,
my
yeah,
good
sure.
friend's Will
That
Fork.
happens.
He's basically like the football. If what would happen if Fat Albert was a football player, essentially. he has that chunky build, loves to smoke them meats, and he also really loves
Just smoke them meats.
He's
He
a big
He's a big barbecue guy.
Okay.
He's a big barbecue guy.
Yeah. So, all right, guys. So, Kirk, should we vote for 3?
Yeah. I say we just vote for 2.
2 again?
Yeah. That's because it's going to get tough. So we might as well just sort of do that at this point. Am I first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Cornelius and Vince.
Ted.
I've got Wisniewski and Steve Smith.
Sorry. Chris.
I got Wisniewski and I got Darren Woodson.
Vinny.
I'd go with Wisniewski and probably go Woodson.
Dan Newman.
Wisniewski and Bennett.
Figured I won't call you by your full name now, so you didn't think I was
Daniel
going off or
Glenn
something. David.
Yeah, I first of all, so I believe I'm the only one that actually tried to push TC Hampton through 2 years ago. So come up as for me. But
Uppance will come.
Is for Longhorn David. He was a Longhorn. But I will still carry the Eric Allen flag. And I was going to go Swilling, but you guys convinced me on Cornelius Bennett, who is an Aggie, and I'll still vote for him anyway.
And Dan Kelly.
I'm speechless over Cornelius Bennett getting this much love over Willie McGinnis, but I will say Vince Wilfork and Steve Wisniewski.
Bill Carroll.
I will go with Pat Swilling and Eric Allen.
Darren.
I'm going to go with Cornelius Bennett and Eric Allen.
Wayne.
I'm gonna go Wisniewski and Wilford.
Tom.
Wilford Wisniewski.
Paul. Do you have his information, Vinny?
Darren Woodson and Steve Wisniewski.
Woodson, Wisniewski. Jeff.
2 things. One, Dan Kelly, I wish you were wearing a beret because the Bruce Arians cracks would never end. Come on, y'all can see it now. You cannot unsee it.
No, I can now. And I gotta say, Jeff, you kind of remind me of you kind of look a bit like Ted. Gotta say.
Yeah, says the guy who won't go on screen, who put his face on screen, but okay.
Yeah, I know what Jeff. I know what Jeff looks like.
Yeah.
So I will go Steve Wisniewski.
Yeah.
And Eric Allen.
Okay. I am going to go Wilfork and Bennett. So we have a 3-way tie.
The 3. We'll just put the 3.
Let's put the 3 through.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Should we talk about the 5s and 6s together?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So again, how much time do we spend debating McNabb for 0 votes?
That's what I was saying.
It's my fault. I opened up with that question because I'm legitimately curious why he's
controversial. No, it's good. It's a great discussion. But
yeah, because I said this before in our last round. Because on the site you can vote for the McNabb gets like the most hate in terms of voting. I've never seen anything so disproportionate to his accomplishments than to his votes.
Can I ask a question here about the 5s?
Yeah.
Like, put Steve Smith out. I would have hard time understanding why Anquan Bolden would move on. Like, because you could make the argument that Steve Smith was better and was the unquestioned number 1 for his team, where Anquan Bolden for a long period of time was the number 2, a hell of a number 2, but still a number 2 behind Fitz.
And they're in the same team in Baltimore.
Yeah.
And I feel that Smith was the more dominant player. I mean, Anquan Bolden's great possession, take the big hit over the middle receiver, but Yeah. I
Granted, it was at the end of their career too. So
agree. Granted, agreed.
well, no. Bolden wasn't there because Bolden by that time would have been in San Francisco, right?
Yeah, he would have been with the.
Oh,
with
I'm
the
sorry.
Niners.
You're right. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah. We're getting old, Evan.
Yeah, my birthday is a week from tomorrow, and it's it's getting old. It's getting bad.
Yeah, I'm just
And my age
yeah,
really, my the age difference really comes out here, doesn't it?
Yeah, shut up.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think here, like if Steve Smith Sr. doesn't advance when we can make the argument he was the better player, I would just have a hard time seeing how Anquan Bolden would. I'm not saying Bolden wasn't really good. I'm think of differentiation. Like, where's the differentiation that even says he's better, let alone Steve?
The difference
Smith
might
was
be a
better than
Super
Bolden.
Bowl.
What's that?
The difference might be a Super Bowl ring. Everything else is very comparable stats wise. Bolden won a championship. That might be the difference. I would have Bolden slightly above, but I wouldn't vote for either one of them just based on the competition.
Like, especially compared to like Holt and Reggie Wayne and so forth. Is that what
exactly?
I think we should just scratch him right now. I think you made a good case. Just get him off the list right now.
Yeah, I'm not really. I like Bolden, but compared to all the receivers on this list, maybe Sands, Hines, Ward, I'm not as big on him personally. And hell, I honestly, I wouldn't mind if you had Rod Smith here instead. If I'm being honest,
I just want to make sure Vinny, because I know somebody's gonna have to love to talk about Richmond Webb. We want to give Richmond Webb his proper airtime.
I don't think we should. I don't think we should knock him off, though.
We're gonna give him his love. Don't worry, Jeff. We will.
Yeah, we don't have to knock him off. We're gonna be voting hopefully.
We'll just vote. Yeah.
With Webb, I just want to say, obviously, I think I'm trying to keep a little bit of personal bias because we a few of us have gotten to know him through the site. Only player in that legendary team of the Dolphins to be a Pro Bowler 7 times in a row. No other Dolphin has ever done that.
Yeah, he just gets the unfortunate thing of timing, and sometimes we talk about timing.
Right.
At the second half of the Marino run, which wasn't nearly prominent as the '80s run, but if you look at him, like, what's the difference between him and, let's say, a Dwight Stevenson? Timing. Maybe.
Well, I don't know about that.
Maybe
stretch out. Stevenson was one of the best all time at his position. I don't know.
Right, that would be the
compare
other
that. I mean, he had a short career, but Stevenson.
Right. Yeah, he was more
far and away better at his position than Webb.
Yeah. But Stevenson also benefited from playing in the peak years of Marino in the early.
It's true, which is what Jeff Saturday's, I think, receiving. But
yeah,
when you look at Saturday and Stevenson, their careers couldn't be. I mean, Stevenson is far and away a better player. So that I wouldn't want to put. I mean, I like Webb. Don't get me wrong, but I don't want to compare him to Dwight Stevenson in this.
That's fair enough.
One's a tackle, one's a center. So
comparison.
All right, so then let's look at Rodney Harrison then, if anyone wants to jump in on that. I'm sure there's a couple.
Only 2 members of the 30 sack, 30 interception club in NFL history. Not that it necessarily. I mean, you can make up any group for anything, but it's him and Ray Lewis, and he played. He played 3 fewer full seasons of Ray Lewis.
Right. I love Rodney Harrison. I when I saw that guy mentioning how he was feeling left out genuinely because of the narrative that, again, like I told you guys before about, McGinnis, like the idea that those Patriots teams were only because of Belichick. I see that look of sadness in his eyes. Yeah, I understand he's made a lot of money throughout his life, but you can kind of just feel like he knows he's one of the best. I mean, but it's kind of funny how the same people that always complain whenever someone's, oh, it's too soft, it's too all this. Yet at the same time, these are the people that are very easily able to just say when something's dirty, even though these are the same people that want those days currently. So, I'd say with Harrison, for being able to be on that same level as someone like Ray Lewis, he needs way more love. I mean, he was a semifinalist last year. He better be one this. He should have been.
Well, I guess I look at Rodney Harrison though, and I ask, maybe in some ways he's a victim of. He played the first half of his career or so with the Chargers and Junior Seau are there.
Yeah.
And then the second half of his career, the last few years of his career, he was with the Patriots. But I'm also thinking, like, you got to think about the peers and the competition that he had. Like he's not in the same class as a Brian Dawkins or an Ed Reed or Jamal. I hope we agree he just wasn't. And then when I look at
those guys are already in the Hall of Fame.
That's what I'm saying. I'm using that as Dan is kind of like the threshold of like conversation. Whereas I look at Leroy Butler and I think, this is a first team all decade player of the 90s, sometimes maybe a little underrated. I don't see the same thing with Rodney Harrison. There are some good.
Right. I guess personally, I think Rodney Harrison is better than Butler or Woodson. So I'm just surprised by him being omitted. He was never popular. There was 1 year where he made first team all pro and didn't get voted to the Pro Bowl.
Those called de facto Pro Bowls.
That's part of my frustration with all this Pro Bowl stuff and all of these accolades, because it does get difficult to judge these guys 20 years after the fact of, who was better or who meant more to their team. And I agree, Rodney Harrison was not the player that Ed Reed was. Maybe not Brian Dawkins. But I do think he was better than Butler or Woodson, which is why I was surprised they both advanced here.
The problem, though, is the people of the time. When you think about the 90s all-decade team, the 2000 all-decade team, Rodney Harrison's nowhere to be found. Leroy Butler is. Like,
well, let's just. I think
ahead.
we were putting way too much emphasis on. I don't think you were here for my my long spiel about the voting awards and how I feel about the voting awards when it comes to all.
He loves them.
I think it's they like to pat themselves on the back by making sure they, the voters continually talk about how they got it right earlier. But I'm just going to say that I am not a fan of Rodney Harrison. I'm not a fan of the Chargers, nor am I a fan of the Patriots. In fact, I do not like Rodney Harrison. I wish he wasn't on this list. But if I'm being honest, first and foremost, the Patriots had winning teams, and he was a part of that. He was a great player as a part of that. He had got Super Bowls. I can't. It's a team sport. I mean, the reason why they were great was because they had a great team and they had great players on the team. They may not be, like statistically great because they did, like you said earlier, they sacrificed for the team. But I also point out that when Harrison was on the Chargers, I remember him being an impact player playing against the Broncos all the time. And his stats kind of show it. I mean, he had some pretty good seasons making an impact as a safety. Now, as a teammate, a player on the Patriots team, he wasn't that impact player. And I don't know if that has to do with how they used him or what, but he did get the championship. So, and when we're talking about all the things that make somebody great, it's championships, it's making plays, being an impact player, having the statistics. I mean, he's got most of those things. So I don't see why we can't advance him, because we're comparing him to first ballot, no-brainer Hall of Famers like Ed Reed and Brian Dawkins. I mean, those are the people that you don't even think about. You get in. Why we're debating Harrison is because he's not one of those, but doesn't mean.
Why isn't Lawyer Malloy on the list? He's got with the Patriots. He's got some of the individual.
But he is. But Lawyer Malloy is. You look at him. He's not the player Rodney Harrison was. He just wasn't.
Just to back up what Tom was saying also, and I think that maybe I didn't articulate as well, but that's what I was saying about Ed Reed and Brian Dawkins and those guys. Like when we're talking about Donovan McNabb, we're not comparing him to Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. And those guys are in. We're comparing them to Eli Manning and other borderline players, because those are the borderline guys. So to me, like, yeah, Rodney Harrison didn't make an all-decade team because Rodney Harrison played from 94 to 2008. So he's not going to make an all-decade team. Leroy Butler played from 1990 to 2001. So his whole career was the 90s. So the all-decade teams, to me, they carry weight when you're comparing apples and apples. We both played 10 years and I made the all-decade team. But when I played 7 of the years and you played it your entire career, it's a different story. So if we're talking about the 1994 or 1995 to 2004 all-decade team, Rodney Harrison's first team safety with Ed Reed probably, or behind Dawkins. But anyway.
Here-
My point being, out of the three safeties remaining, to me, Rodney Harrison's the best.
Can we talk about Sam Mills?
Yeah, let me just say one last thing on Rodney Harrison. If
Yeah.
Rodney Harrison knocks the football off of the stickum on David Tyree's helmet and then retires after that game, there's a whole different.
He said the stick him off of David Tyrese.
You understand? You understand what I'm saying? I don't actually think there's a stickum on.
Got
his
a few championship hats right here from the area, guys. Don't forget,
That's hilarious.
So, all right. So we got Sam Mills. Anybody in for Sam Mills?
Jeff said he wants to talk about Sam Mills, didn't he?
Well, I think he was the only one we hadn't talked about. That's I was just making sure we didn't spend too much time just on one or two players.
I presented him last year, so I dug
Yeah,
into him quite a
please do.
bit. I'm a little biased probably because I presented him. I feel he's stuck right there with the Bennett's and the Swillings. He's in that same grouping. His story's good. I wouldn't be upset if he ever got in. I just don't know if he's one of the top 5 or anything for this year. But if anybody wants stats on him, I got him pulled up. I'll just leave it at that.
By the way, Jack, welcome.
Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Good to see
Hey,
you.
Jack, how you doing?
I'm well. How's everyone here?
Good.
You're gonna be disappointed when you
Sorry,
see the
Tillman.
list.
soothing.
I tried on Tillman, man, but I just don't have your passion for it. So-
Jack has the soothing podcast voice. Hello, Jack.
Hi.
All right.
I don't-
So with that in mind, are we ready to vote on these
Yeah.
guys?
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a
Please go
question.
ahead.
Yeah.
When people make the case for Sam Mills, how much do they include his non-NFL career?
A lot.
It should be included.
It should be included.
Yeah, I included it quite a bit last year because when you dig into all the stuff, obviously just looking straight at stats, he might fall short, but when you factor in all those other things, it starts telling a little different story.
He was a 3-time league all-star in the USFL, wasn't
Yep.
Yeah, well, it wasn't I think the Stars won like 2 championships, if I'm not mistaken, right?
he? Yeah. And I think like it's important context to say for those couple of reasons that the USFL existed. You know, sometimes there's that NFL bias, similar with the AFL in the 60s, is always assuming the NFL is a superior brand. Think of like WWE versus WCW, is because WWE is the one that survived. Same thing here with the NFL. But there is a piece of the NFL wasn't at 100% full strength because you had a number of stars like the Reggie Whites of the world, the Sam Mills of the world played in the USFL at that time. So that should matter. It should consider how much.
To be fair, didn't Sam Mills go undrafted?
Yes.
He
went
yes, he
undrafted.
did. But there's also guys that have gone undrafted that ended up being outstanding. I mean, don't forget, Tom Brady was, pick 199 in the draft. It shouldn't really mean much. I mean, regardless of when you're drafted,
That's rare.
how you
though.
play on the field when you get to that level is a whole different story.
No, I understand.
5'9"
I'm just saying it
linebackers
was
usually go
necessarily-
undrafted.
Yeah,
One of
I'm just saying it was more of a necessity for him to choose USFL at that time. 'Cause he
Here's
was-
one of the tidbits I had found last year when researching it. One of the historians said for the USFL, they said that he was one of the top 3 players in the USFL, which also included Jim Kelly, Herschel Walker, and Reggie White. So this guy's saying he was better than one of the 3 in the USFL. So
He was also the first face of the franchise of the Carolina Panthers on that 96 team that went to the NFC Championship. I know that was towards the end of his career, but he, I know we talked a little bit about the young death helps him a little bit in some ways. It can be the perception. I'm not sure if that's fair or not, but it's not unfair to say that because sometimes that can happen. Think of Roy Halladay. Like sometimes the early death can help you.
Yeah, the whole story with Halladay was like not really going on a baseball tangent, but a big reason as to why he kind of kept it to himself was because he personally believed that people in the media would absolutely destroy him, and it eventually led to loved watching Halladay play.
Yeah, but let's stay out of baseball. We're going far enough.
The point of my question is that we all know obviously that it's the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but that in reality it is the NFL plus leagues that eventually folded into the NFL Hall of Fame. And I'm noting that if we laid on with Sam Mills and say, oh, well, he was this and that in the USFL, I think that does open the door to some other cases. And I'm just curious to hear how he plays as an NFL candidate versus how he plays as a pro football candidate. He's pretty low down here, and I feel much more strongly about, say, Richmond Webb, who I can't believe is this low, than Sam Mills. But I was curious to ask the question to see how it is.
All right, Jack, I think we're getting a lot of feedback on your mic, just, or it's like you're touching the mic or something, just, So, all right, should we vote?
Yes. Yeah. So what were we saying? 2 or 3?
I'd say at this point 3.
Okay.
Because we went to the top.
All right. So everyone's voting for 3 people to advance.
Yep. All right, go ahead. So Kirk, who are you going for?
Bennett, Vince, and I'm flipping between. Actually, Wisniewski.
Wisniewski. Okay. Yeah. Ted.
Got Mills, Webb, and Wisniewski.
Chris.
I got Wisniewski, Webb, and Harrison.
Vinny.
I'd go Wisniewski, Webb, and Harrison.
Dan Newman. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Wisniewski, Bennett, and Harrison.
Oh, how did Wisniewski only get 3 votes? Bennett and Harrison. Okay.
I love this process.
Dan Kelly.
Harrison, Webb, Wilford.
Bill Carroll.
Wisniewski, Bennett, and Wisniewski, Bennett, and Webb.
Wayne.
Wisniewski, Wilford, and Harrison.
Tom.
Harrison, Webb, Wisniewski.
Dave Whitlock.
I'll go Harrison, Bolden, and Wilfork.
Jack.
The 2 offensive linemen.
And Wisniewski and Webb and who?
And Wilfork.
And Wilfork. Paul, do we have his stuff, Vinny?
Steve Wisniewski, Richmond Webb, and Sam Mills. And how the hell did
Jeff?
Steve Wisniewski only have 3 votes?
Wisniewski has 20 votes.
Sorry. It's 10, not 20. This time. Sorry about that, guys. It just feels like 20 with all the people voting for him. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, it's a condemnation of the actual the Hall of Fame voters. Wisniewski, Webb, and anything to block Rodney Harrison. I'm kidding, not really. Vince Wilfork.
All right,
sorry, if we're gonna go with the Patriot, let's go with the better one.
Fair enough. I would go Harrison, Wisniewski, and Wilfork. So we have Wisniewski and Webb with 12 and 9, Harrison with 8. Is that going to be the cutoff?
Yep. There's always one who just climbs out of nowhere.
Yeah. And is Harrison the one this year?
McGinnis last time.
Wisniewski.
It was Wisniewski.
No, I remember, Jeff, in case you don't know, last year, Tom was telling us how Tom Nayland's the greatest center of all time.
But a lot of us,
a lot of us believe him.
Yeah.
Right now.
I was convincing, not convincing enough. He didn't make the final cut, but
For that one year, though, you had that one shining moment, as the Final Four song says.
I hear that this isn't really talked about, but apparently you can put in for literally anyone you want if you email it to them. So Tom, if you really want to, I guess you can just right away and say, I want Tom Nayland on the list next year, and
which is
absolutely.
Which is how Jake Delhomme gets nominated.
It's not. It's not a. It's not a
big family.
It's not a maybe. It's I nominate people every year.
That's fair.
All right, so we are to the. Should we take 9, 8, 7 together?
Or do we want to go from the top and then just put three in right now?
That's fine. Let's do that.
All right. So what we do the 12s to 14?
Yep.
So Jack, you missed before. Steve Tasker was one of the 14s, but there was a little bit of hesitation from the group. So we
Sorry about that.
back on Tasker. No, sorry needed. That's what this is all about.
Yeah, and Reggie Wayne did get in despite because you weren't here again. So I said that at the time.
So the guys on the far left are the ones that everybody's agreed goes to the final 15. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Actually, Jack, you weren't even here, and you got more play than some of these people.
Yeah, and again, just Jack, since you're coming in, if it's yellow, they're from our list. If it's red, it's from the NFL's list. If it's orange, it's both.
And again, sorry.
How in the
apologies
hell
for
did
my-
Kevin Williams not even be a semifinalist? That's just
I'm
with you. I'm with you. I can't.
Jeff, you're talking to the man who's become the biggest Kevin Williams stan out there. It's ridiculous. I'm a Patriots guy, and Kevin Williams is my number one.
I shake my head every time. Like they just don't understand sometimes.
It's like they keep always talking about how much their AP All Pros matter so much. Oh, I love my first team All Pros. And
What
then when it
impression
actually
is that
push comes to
supposed to be?
shove,
That was Ron Borges. That was Ron.
It sounded
Borges.
like Tommy Boy when he
that
gets
is
all
Ron
crazy.
Borges, yes, how'd you know?
was that
yes.
a plagiarism impression?
Oh yes, actually it is. How'd you know? It's like always it's always talking about how once the AP All Pros matter, but yet when it actually push comes to shove, it's like ignored. So yeah, practice what you preach, or else you're going to be crucified.
Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so we have our 14, 13s, 12s. Oh, Leroy Butler got in here. Sorry. So 14s, 13s, and 12s. So we have Tasker, Rondé Barber, Jared Allen, Richard Seymour, Willie Anderson, and Andre Johnson. Should we put what, 3 in?
Yeah, 3 in. And I think right now, if anyone wants to make a case other than Tasker, because we've heard some negatives on that, against any of these people.
If
'Cause,
Jared Allen got a haircut, he wouldn't be on this list.
I would say no to Willie Anderson, and here's why. I think Richmond Webb and Wisniewski as offensive linemen. Granted, you're comparing tackle to interior lineman with Wisniewski. But if I look at that list and you ask me who's the best offensive lineman, not in on this list at least, but Selly obviously is already accounted for. But I would look at Willie Anderson and say, good player, yes. Also played right tackle, which at that time was viewed as less premium, although I think that's more of the NFL like overrating left tackle versus right tackle. But Richmond Webb was a better player. Steve Wisniewski was a better player. When you look at the accolades, what they were part of, I would look at those two and say that they belong more than a Willie Anderson would. Sorry for any Willie Anderson stands here, but I would have trouble saying like, how does Richmond Webb and Wisniewski not make it, but Willie Anderson does? Like, I'd have a hard time.
They're all still candidates. They're all.
I would just add, last year when we got down to the finalist, I was the one who presented Anderson as well as Mills, the two people nobody else wanted to present. So that's who I took. And again, when you start digging into it and researching it, I learned a lot. I spent hours and hours on this. I think some people have seen the documents. The case for Anderson's, yeah, he doesn't have the accolades, but when you start looking at those advanced metrics, things like Pro Football Focus type things, and they're just now getting that data, not allowing sacks to hardly at all. Like his numbers probably do put him ahead of those other guys, only when you dig into that advanced information.
Win rate. Yeah.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's irrelevant because he's up there at 15. I'm just curious to know if it's been brought up. I'm curious to know if it's something that other people have parsed through. Tony Baselli, we all watched him. We know what he was, but he was a left tackle, correct?
Yes.
For a left-handed quarterback.
Yes.
Right.
Does that get discussed at all?
We barely.
But the difference was that even though he's a left-handed quarterback, a lot of times back then the best pass rushers still rushed from the same side. Whereas now there's a ton of premium pass rushers that are rushing over the right offensive tackle. But I think back then it still was predominantly rushing from the left tackle side.
Even against Brunel and Steve Young?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but I can't remember
That's right.
premium pass rushers rushing from the right tackle back.
And I-
there.
Especially from a
and I-
lineman standpoint, from a defensive end standpoint, there was not a lot of rotation, not a lot of like, we're going to line him up over the right tackle, which is where I was talking about in today's game. The left tackle versus right tackle debate to me is kind of moved because people move the premier edge rushers around so much. Back in Kelly's time in the 90s, early 2000s, no, it was primarily you played the position that you played for the most part. It's a valid point. Like, he wasn't protecting Brunell's blind side.
He was protecting Brunell, and I didn't mean that as a knock on Baselli. I was more curious about it when we talk about, oh, someone was only a right tackle.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to chip away at a left tackle on a lefty QB? And that was what I was asking.
Yeah, I think that one might be saved for the next round because like
I'm a big Richmond Webb.
As are a lot of us for sure.
Yeah.
I think what we did just because before you got here, so like when we had 15 out of 18, we just sort of like put those ones through because they were the highest getters.
Absolutely. I'm just curious if that's something that people.
It hasn't yet.
Talk about.
Yeah.
All right. Does anyone have anything, I guess, on the downside for Barber, Allen, Seymour, Andre Johnson?
I do not.
No, I'm a huge Andre Johnson stan personally. I know that when I look at someone like Andre Johnson, I don't just look at him as a player. I also look at everything he was brought into. You see, when it came to those Texans teams, they were bad. I mean, David Carr was, he was set up for failure for the most part, but the failure of Matt Millen to foolishly take Mr. Vicodin himself in Charles Rogers and instead allow Andre Johnson to come in their lap. And hell, even when they had Ryan Mallett as their quarterback, he was still the same player as he was with Matt Schaub. I'm not saying Matt Schaub was any Hall of Fame or anything. He was, whether he still is their best quarterback, unless you maybe say Deshaun Watson, but outside of him, he didn't really have much to go off of in terms of a very high quality quarterback. But yet every single time he was always brought up in the condition and the conversation as one of the league's very premier receivers. And it's a shame that the team wasted his career for the most part. And at the very end, he had a bit of a tour of the AFC South with the Colts and the Titans. And when I see someone like an Andre Johnson to still be up high in like the NFL leaderboards of yards per reception as well as yards, to me, considering what he was with, I'd put him ahead of any of the other first-year wide receivers, in my opinion. I
agree, Vinny, because if you took Reggie Wayne, got a good number of years as a second option behind Marvin Harrison, like that's got to count at some point. And he also,
definitely.
What would Andre Johnson do in that system with that quarterback? You look at his numbers alone; they hold up. I think here is where you could make the argument. The circumstance of Houston both helps him and hurts him. But he was absolutely the face of that franchise for a decade. And I'd still argue he's the better player all time in that franchise's history compared to J.J. Watt, just from the length of time and peak performance at the top of his position. I would have more passion for Andre than I would, let's say, a Reggie Wayne or maybe.
Oh, yeah.
I would just say I find it hard to believe, though, that we eliminated Smith way long ago. And to me, their stats, almost everything about them is almost exactly the same when you dig into it.
I don't disagree with you, Ted. I think there's certainly a similarity
I'm a
there.
person who has 4 of the wide receivers in my top 15. So I'm a huge wide receiver guy. I just don't understand the love for Johnson and not the love for Smith. And Smith had a higher yards per catch than Johnson.
I think the reason why the idea for Johnson is a bit above Smith is more so because, yes, Smith also was fantastic in terms of the return game and, especially in his, rookie season. But I think what a lot of people think of when it comes to Smith is that, not saying the Panthers were like elite level teams, but you had a John Fox leveled head coach. I mean, you still had a team like the Panthers that would be at worst a middling team that would try to make the playoffs. And of course they made the Super Bowl in 2003. But when it came to the Texans, I mean, they didn't have their first playoff appearance until 2011. when they won the division and ended up being, the Bengals, of course. I think it's more so when I look at someone like Andre Johnson, is that he was able to accomplish so much and be on a level similar to that of Steve Smith with far less help in the process. I that's the main reason why I personally, see him in a bit of a slightly higher regard, not only against Steve Smith. It's more so just because, Johnson was able to do much more, just as much with less. That's really the main idea it comes from.
Yeah, I would just, what Paul's saying over here in the chat about the logjam wide receiver, we're all going to be all over the map on it. And it's just curious on how we are so kind of all over on it. It's going to be hard for the voters.
Yeah.
No matter what happens, the internet's still going to be upset.
Yep. I got that right. So let's go advance again in the interest of time. So
I would say only one thing I feel strongly about.
Sure.
And I know it's a difference of one vote, but to me, in an era where safeties were killing it, Leroy Butler to me was the best of the best in his time. I'm a huge Carnell Lake guy. I love Darren Woodson. Man, I thought Leroy Butler, having to watch him 2 times a year.
Yep.
Denver had to game plan him for the Super Bowl, which I never even remember hearing anybody game planning for Troy Polamalu in the Super Bowl. I could have missed that story, but I don't remember hearing about it. I heard about Ed Reed and Leroy Butler. So I would say, in terms of who do I feel strongly about, I would love to be able to put up a vote for Leroy Butler right now. I would love to see him in that group with the 14 through the 12, because I think he is tippy top.
He was first team all decade, and he created the Lambeau League. That has to matter.
We can put him up there if you want.
He's in my five.
Here's another thing I just realized too. Even though I'm not the biggest John Turney fan, at the same time, he actually was able to pile together all the all-decade teams. And even though I'm not a huge fan of the all-decade teams, listening on all of them, Leroy Butler actually is on the most first-team all-decade teams than anyone else, and that's including people like Steve Atwater and Carnell Lake, and even Ronnie Lott, who wasn't on there. He was only on the Hall of Fame's second team, but Leroy Butler is on all of them. He's on the Hall of Fame's list, Sports Illustrated, PFR, and Sporting News as well. So yeah,
I think if we talk about team biases, Jack and I being Bears guys, for us to be unfortunately Sterling Sharp's not on this list, but I understand that. But if we're pounding the table so hard for Leroy Butler, there's a reason for that. We know that after Reggie White, he was the best player on that Packers defense. Those were Packers defenses that were top notch in the mid 90s. And he was one of the preeminent safeties of his entire decade.
All right. So I like what you did there, Evan, just putting Butler there. So why don't we just say we're not going to vote?
I mean, three out of 6 versus 3 out of 7 makes no difference. It's still 3. So,
well, why don't we just go 4 out of 7 unless there's any objections? And then we've got 10 in.
That's fine. That's fine. That gives us 10 and 5 spots left. All right. So Kirk, you start.
Tasker, Barber, Butler, Seymour.
Ted.
We've got Butler, Seymour, Barber. No, I don't think it's going to really matter. Let's go with Willie Anderson.
Chris.
Butler, Seymour, Barber, and Willie Anderson as well.
Vinny.
Butler, Seymour, Barber, and Tasker.
Dan Newman.
Tasker, Barber, Jared Allen, and Butler.
Bill Carroll.
Let's see. Jared Allen, Rondé Barber, Andre Johnson, Richard Seymour.
Wayne.
Butler, Seymour, Barber, Anderson.
Sorry, was Rondé, Seymour, Anderson, and who?
Barber, Seymour, Willie Anderson, Leroy Butler.
Okay, there was a break on the line when you said that one. Okay, Tom Hall.
Barber, Allen, Seymour, Butler.
Barber, Allen, Seymour, Butler. Dave Whitlock.
Angry at the lack of Andre Johnson, so he's the first. Willie Anderson, Jared Allen, and Steve Tasker.
Okay. Contrarian view. Jack.
Leroy Butler. You guys hear me all right?
Yep, you're good.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Sweet. Leroy Butler, Steve Tasker, Richard Seymour, Willie Anderson.
Dan Kelly.
Rondé Barber, Richard Seymour, Andre Johnson, and Jared Allen.
Paul. Well, if you can give me his, it'd be great.
Okay. Paul, what would you say? Richard Seymour, Leroy Butler, Andre Johnson, and Steve Tasker.
All right. Richard Seymour, Leroy Butler, Andre Johnson, and Steve Tasker.
That's what he says.
All right. Jeff.
I agree with the contrarian just to be different. I'll say Andre Johnson. Just to go with him first. Rondé Barber. Richard Seymour. Leroy Butler.
Okay. All right. So for me, it's Tasker, Seymour, Willie Anderson, and probably Andre Johnson. So, all right. So that means out of that group, we have 2 10s and a 12, and then a 7, 2 6s, and a 5. So are we putting we're putting the 4?
Yeah, we're putting the 4.
Okay. So that means Steve Tasker and Rondé Barber. So Tasker had 7, Barber had 10. Oh, sorry, I forgot to. I have to copy this so I have it at the bottom, so I know what we've done. All right, sorry. All right, so Tasker had 7, Barber had 10, Jared Allen 5, Richard Seymour 12, Willie Anderson 6, Andre Johnson 6, Leroy Butler 10. So he Lambo leaps into the final 10.
Literally in this
Well
case.
played, sir. Well played.
Thank you. I have kids. I have to have all my jokes in a base.
Is there any other joke format?
Yeah. Well, you can know a joke becomes a dad joke when it becomes a parent.
Oh,
what is it when it's not a bad joke?
Somebody
Very
mute him.
nice.
Mute him now.
I got a lot of them, unfortunately, and it's 10 o'clock at night my time, so that's all I got left. Okay. All right. So we have those 3 guys left at 12: Jared Allen, Willie Anderson, and Andre Johnson. At this point, should we just go through the 9s, 8s, 7s, and the remaining people and move?
I think with what we have, we've got 5 spots left, and we've got how many people remaining?
11.
6. Okay. I think we're good to go with the whole sandwich at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So should we talk about the 5 guys we haven't
Yeah.
talked about yet?
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So that's kept for those scoring at home. That's Kevin Williams, who had 9 votes coming in, Devin Hester with 8, Ricky Waters, Sean Alexander, and Henry Ellard all with 7. Do you mind if I start with Henry Ellard?
Please.
Henry
Go ahead.
Ellard, when he retired, was second all time in receptions, and the entire world changed after he retired. If we're judging people by their era, Henry Ellard is the second best receiver of his era. I mean, just statistically, there's Jerry Rice, who's on this different planet, and then Henry Ellard is the next guy. I don't understand why he's not a semifinalist from the NFL. I know we have a logjam of people. Again, and not to rip on the Steelers fans, but there's no comparison between Henry Ellard and Heinz Ward.
I am a Steelers fan, and I could not agree more.
Yeah, there's just no comparison.
Totally echo that.
So how he's not at least a semifinalist, I don't get. In a world where we have way too many wide receivers, I just don't want Henry Ellard to get forgotten. So,
Hey, Henry Ellard, his first 4 years with the Rams, those were Eric Dickerson's first 4 years in the league as well. So that offense was very run heavy in those first 4 seasons. So he still led the team every year in receptions, but I mean, it was like to a 30, 40, 50 receptions because Eric Dickerson was, well, Eric Dickerson. So
It's a great point for Ellard is that once Dickerson was traded.
oh, Jeff, we lost you halfway through that sentence.
Sorry, I was saying it's a great point about Ellard is that once Dickerson was traded in I think it was Halloween of '88. Like that whole offense changed, went more Jim Everett based, and Henry Ellard, like that's when he started to become what he was. So I feel like someday he'll end up having to be a committee inductee because he's just caught in between, and it's unfortunate.
Yes, he's become the more modern version of Billy Houghton.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now and I'd love to see make it too.
I wanted him to make it in while he was still, like, no, he's still alive. Yeah, hold on, Billy, a little longer.
Bill's trying to kill him before he's dead.
Sorry, he is alive, but he's in his upper 80s.
No, 91 years old. 91 and still kicking it to this day, but just
Hold
don't
on.
jinx it, Bill. Hold on, Billy. Hold it on there. You're still here.
Does anyone have anything for the other four? I will go off on Kevin Williams. We've all heard my stuff before. So if anyone has anyone else they want to talk about, please do.
Yeah, I guess I have one thing here for Devin Hester.
All right, now I'll hang back.
I guess here would be my thing for Devin Hester. If Steve Tasker is on the list, like Steve Tasker is one of the best special of all time in terms of the role that he had as a gunner and so forth. Devin Hester scored touchdowns. It was a crock that he wasn't voted the 2006 most valuable player in the league. Look at the Super Bowl. The Colts knew that Rex Grossman was bad. They were willing to concede the 40-yard line in field position because they knew the one guy on the Bears offense that could beat them was on the special teams, and that was Devin Hester. That's just period. He house called that opening kickoff in the Super Bowl, and here I was thinking, even Rex Grossman can't screw that up. But when you look at, you're talking about first team all decade stuff. You're talking about all-time leader in return touchdowns. You're talking about the absolute best. When you think of special teams play in National Football League history, I'm sorry, you don't think about Steve Tasker first. Maybe the more serious, like hardcore fans say, I love Steve Tasker, and I do too, but not more than Devin Hester. Devin Hester had a greater impact on his team. The Bears had 2 championship game appearances, 1 Super Bowl appearance when he was in the peak of his career. And again, he didn't get the benefit of getting to ride along with Jim Kelly and Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed, Bruce Smith. He was the difference that allowed the Bears to be in that position with guys like Sexy Rexy Grossman and Jay Smoke 'em while you got him Cutler. Like he had crap at quarterback, crap on offense. And these teams were still contenders, elite teams, not just because of the defense alone. It was because of Devin Hester.
You got to put the best player at his position of all time in the Hall of Fame.
That's right.
That's all I gotta say.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the best. I mean, Rick Upchurch should be in because he was the best for a long time, but Hester's better. I mean, he's the best of all time. He's got to be in. I don't understand why there's really much of a debate other than.
I mean, Hester is literally on the NFL's 100th anniversary team. What more do I have to say? He's literally listed as the greatest, along with Billy White Shoes Johnson, the 2 of the greatest return specialists to ever play the game, and he's on that list. It would feel foolish not to have him. I mean, I love Tasker a lot, but I do agree with him. As much as I adore Steve Tasker, Devin Hester, everyone knows throughout as the guy on the Bears offense, or maybe like Matt Forte, that they would look at and see, they're going to score a touchdown on us. And yeah, it wasn't enough when it came against the Colts in the Super Bowl, but whenever anyone talks about Devin Hester, they literally say the GOAT when it comes to return specialists. There's no way I would say no to him.
And his return touchdowns would be so out of touch that nobody could ever touch him if teams actually kicked to him more and had the courage to kick to him more. You had a stretch a couple of years after the Bears Super Bowl season that teams just refused to kick to him. If there are any Broncos fans on there, I think it was maybe the 2007 season where Sauerbrunn kicked to him twice right down the middle of the field, and house called both of those.
I remember.
He said, thanks for the trauma. So I'm just saying, like, there's a piece there that has to account for his greatness too. Way more than Tasker. If Tasker's on there, Hester has to be on there.
Jack, you're going to say something?
I've got some things to say about Devin. It feels like the job has been done for me, so I won't bore you completely. I'll say a few things. The first is that if what Devin did, he did at quarterback or defensive end or linebacker or wide receiver, this wouldn't be a conversation. He'd be first ballot. The only reason he's not first ballot is because we've never seen a pure returner go in at all. But if he were at any other position with the impact that he had, combined with the numbers that he had, it wouldn't be a discussion.
Well, also he played some time at wide receiver too. If you remember, at one point in time, they were trying to make him their number one wide receiver. So
Yeah,
there are some contributions there as a wide receiver that are not there for Tasker. And they also took him some out of the return game because of trying to make him the number one wide receiver.
Right. And I'll say to that, first of all, I always thought he was a better receiver than he was given credit. But I'll say to that when Devin was not really returning kicks in 2008, we were still fourth in the league at one point in the season in average starting field position on kickoffs. In 2012, when he had not yet scored a touchdown, he didn't score a touchdown in the return game. In 2012, there was a point in the season, let's see it here, where heading into December of 2012, we were number one in the league at starting field position heading into December of 2012, despite Devin having not had a kick return touchdown or a punt return touchdown that year. He was changing games without even being on the field at that point. If you make your mark correctly, you can do that even when you're not around. So I don't see any conversation where Devin isn't in the 15. If he was any other position, we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Well, if he was any other position, he would be on the field a lot more, though. But my general feel is if you guys voted Steve Tasker through, you absolutely have to vote Devin Hester through.
Yes.
Personally, I wouldn't have voted either of them through. But once Tasker gets through, I don't see how you can leave Hester off. I think he was more impactful, and they were both arguably the best at what they did. Tasker, I think, maybe has been surpassed by Matthew Slater, but Hester is still undoubtedly the best return man in history. And so with Tasker being in, it wouldn't make sense to leave Hester out, even though personally, like I said, I wouldn't have voted either through.
I'm with you, Dan.
I think, Dan, what you said is interesting, and it ties back to something that Vinny said about mentioning that when Devin was on the Bears, maybe the only person other than Devin who we would think about was Matt Forte. When Forte and Hester were teammates, Forte accounted for 22% of our combined offensive and special teams yardage, and Hester accounted for 20%.
Yeah.
We're talking about offense, Jeff. We're talking about how they are in offense.
No, I'm saying combined offense and special teams. Those are the tools you have to move the ball forward.
Okay. Yeah, I was about to say, if you're thinking about those Bears teams, you're thinking of Urlacher first.
Oh yeah, obviously when it comes to like those teams, Urlacher is the kind of guy that you go for. But when it comes to their offense, like it's usually Forte and of course Devin Hester.
Well, if we're being brutally honest, nobody's thinking about those Bears teams, period. They weren't good teams. They made a Super Bowl with a good run of defense and special teams. But I mean, if you want to talk comparable, where we could talk about Brian Mitchell and what he accounted for out of the Redskins' total yardage. And
I'm a huge Brian Mitchell guy.
I'm sure you are. You're a huge Sean Landetta guy. I appreciate your I sincerely do.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. I am.
I'm going to leave you on my side when we get around to Matthew Slater in a few
minutes. Don't worry. We'll get there when we get there, Dan.
I get what you're saying.
Like I say, I'm not looking to talk trash about Devin Hester. I just, to me, if Tasker's in, he's obviously in as well.
So
I think
we heard about Alexander
a lot. We've
Waters.
really plugged Hester quite a bit, and I think one person on here that hasn't been mentioned that needs to be is Sean Alexander.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the Hall of Fame committee gives him any love. I don't know why. I mean, he was obviously the best at his position, not only the best at his position, but the best player in the NFL for a season, and obviously was very good for the rest of the season that he played. I don't understand. I mean, if someone is voted league MVP and it was not a fluke. He obviously had other career statistics to go along with it. Why he's not being talked about more as a Hall of Famer is beyond me. I mean,
Tomlinson, Priest Holmes, some of the guys at that time. I'm not saying you're wrong, Thomas. I'm just, if you're asking the question why he's not talked about more, because he was, a key cog of that 2005 Super Bowl Seahawks team. I think he just kind of gets lost in the shuffle a little bit because he didn't get 10,000 rushing yards. His career was a little bit shorter.
I get that, but we all, I mean, what I'm talking about, we've got Ricky Waters and we've got Eddie Jordan, and we've got Fred Taylor from the Hall of Fame list on here, and Sean Alexander not. And when I think about greatness, was this player ever the best at their position? Is kind of what I think about, or the best in the league overall. Being the MVP, he fits that bill way better than those other three running backs, just because they played a little longer and were able to churn out some more yardage. I don't think they should have any weight in this discussion over Sean Alexander.
There was even a time where he actually didn't even make the semi. There was actually a time when he didn't even make the preliminary list. I'm like, are you kidding me? He's one of only 8 guys in history to have 100 touchdowns. And the fact that he was able to do that within a very, very short span is literally, there's not much you can say. He is literally the guy that I think of in terms of 2000s running backs, not Fred Taylor, not Corey Dillon, not even my childhood hero growing up, Tiki Barber. The one I always think of when it comes to running backs of the 2000s, other than LaDainian Tomlinson and Adrian James, it has to be, without a question of a doubt, Sean Alexander. This guy was a bruiser, and he played every single game. But because he also played every single game, his body wore down after his MVP run. So it really shouldn't be much of a surprise that, after that big 6-year utter Giga Chad dominance, he would soon just fizzle out and be done when he was spending a single year with the Redskins.
But Sean sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, and I think this goes back to just different people have different criteria. For me, Sean Alexander had a 5-year career.
Yeah.
And if you're only going to have a 5-year career, you can't have one MVP season. You need to have 3 or 4 MVP caliber seasons.
I totally disagree with that. I mean, you've got several players with short careers that are in the Hall of Fame that didn't have multiple MVP years.
So
voted award, it goes to quarterbacks.
Who would you say? So Tom, who would you say is a comparable Hall of Famer that had a five-year NFL career? Because that's really all he had.
Well, I mean, I would point to Terrell Davis, but his accolades came from, he got in because of his playoff and Super Bowl run.
He won Super Bowls.
I mean, but he had a short career, had one MVP season. I mean, I'll give you that his playoff
I'll give you one right now.
was above and beyond, and that put him over. But I'm not saying that Sean Alexander should be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but he shouldn't be behind
He's
3
in
other
Jamal Lewis category right now.
Well, I think we would agree, but Sully's going to get in. He pretty much had a 6-year career.
Yeah, but he also was probably the best at his position for 3 years of those.
I would say Alexander was probably at the best for 3 years. I'm just saying, I think that's at least a reasonable comp.
Well, Ricky Waters, if we're going to talk about Ricky Waters,
I like Waters better than Alexander. I'll just put that out there. But Alexander is my number 2 out of the running backs. So,
well, I guess here would be my thing with Ricky Waters. Like, Ricky Waters is one of those ones, he gets that selfish label, and deservedly so. When asked why you going to play hard, why would I? But when you look at the numbers, his career is better. I believe he has more 1,000-yard seasons. He was also a better pass catcher. Like, he was one of those key calls when you think about West Coast running backs. He was a bit similar to Roger Craig, but if Roger Craig's not in, would Ricky Waters be in?
Roger Craig should be in.
Yeah, well, and I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that, but I also look and say Roger Craig also didn't make this list.
Well,
a senior.
Roger Craig is also in the senior pool right now. That's the reason.
Oh,
why.
that's right. That's right. I'm sorry. That's right. He was that. I'm that old. Okay.
No, don't worry.
I was just
It's
8
cool.
years old when Vinny reminded me that I'm old enough to be his dad. Thanks a lot, Vinny. I appreciate that very much. But
all right, so
I would
let's-
say if
Right.
with Sean Alexander, there's not much difference to me with him and Priest Holmes. Priest Holmes had maybe 3 seasons versus Sean Alexander's 5. But if you're comparing like their absolute peak seasons, there's not much of a difference. Playing in an era with the LTs and the Curtis Martins of the world, so on and so forth. Like Alexander was really good. I kind of agree with Dan. Like there's just not enough meat on the bone there, especially if we're talking about top 15 in this go round when I look relative competition.
And I will say this, so like devil's advocate, as much as I do talk about his 100, touchdowns, a big reason why he also has that is because his MVP season did have a quarter of them were from his MVP season. And afterwards, he had the injury problems in the following year, and eventually, so even though I would be very big on Alexander, at the same time, I am someone that, I'm down with Ricky Waters itself, but like, I could either be fine with if I cancel them out. That's kind of how I see it.
Okay. Do we want to do one little conversation on Kevin Williams?
Yeah, let me just get my one thing out of the way. I'll say it again.
Yep.
I know that Pro Football Reference came up with their Hall of Fame monitor thing. He's the 6-time first-team All-Pro in 12 seasons. But here's the list of people who have at least 100 score, which is the average score for a Hall of Famer on their system, at defensive tackle. Alan Page, Bob Lilly, Randy White, Joe Green, John Randall, Warren Sapp, Aaron Donald, Merlin Olsen, Kevin Williams, Cortez Kennedy, and Henry Jordan. What do those players all have in common?
They've never been in your kitchen.
That's actually true. That was a joke because I was on Jeopardy, for you guys who don't know. So it was a Cliff Clavin Cheers joke. But the thing, other than Aaron Donald, all those guys are in the Hall of Fame. Every single one of them. And the only reason Aaron Donald's not in the Hall of Fame is he's still playing, right? Like he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. The idea that he is not even a semifinalist is bizarre. He is by far the best player in the NFL who did not make the semifinalist list, who's eligible for this season. I am a Patriots guy. I will go on record as saying that the stupidest controversy in the history of the NFL is the Star Caps one that the Williams brothers got busted on. They asked the NFL what supplements they should use. The NFL told them what supplements to use. They used the supplements, and the supplements had banned steroids in them, and they got busted for it. It was like the dumb, like they're like, which one should we use to get in trouble? Use these. We use them. They get busted for it because there was something not in the label. I have no idea if that counts against them. I have no idea if it's the fact he played for Vikings teams that didn't particularly go anywhere necessarily.
I think that hurts him more.
That
That hurts him more. The fact that he played on Vikings teams that didn't go anywhere. Like being somebody that watched all of John Randall's career and then all of Kevin Williams' career. Like while John Randall was the bigger media star, John Randall was not the overall football player that Kevin Williams was. Like Kevin Williams could get to the quarterback, although that was tended to be more earlier on in his career.
Right.
But he was a predominant run stuffer. He was a guy that would collapse the pocket. So he might not have the big sack numbers. I can promise you, especially having to see him twice a year and more, living in the Midwest at the time and watching other Vikings games, like Kevin Williams, I think about before I think about John Randall, even though John Randall had all the media and John Randall in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Does anyone think that potentially the Love Boat scandal has anything to do with it? I mean, the Love Boat scandal didn't stop, Nate Burleson from having a very successful media career. So I don't really know if it affects Kevin Williams' potential to make the Hall of Fame.
No, if Kevin Williams if it was Kevin Williams with the Wizinator, I would be beating the table all day that he should have been first ballot. Terrio Smith.
I probably would too. I probably would too.
Well, here's the other thing. Kevin Williams doesn't even have a Twitter handle. Like he's not on social media at all.
Yeah. There's no push for him.
That may also have a problem because I always want to be like, hey, someone vote for at Kevin Williams. And he just doesn't. He's not anywhere.
So it kind of fits who he is, just under the radar.
Guys,
yeah, go ahead, Jack.
Can I make a procedural point here? First of all, I want to note that I didn't want to cut in, so I dropped my running back comments in the chat because I didn't want to talk. it sounds like we don't necessarily think there's a running back in this group that we feel really strongly about. So we've got 5 slots left. We've got 11 players remaining. What if we make this easy on ourselves and remove Alexander and Waters, and that can be a conversation for another year? I don't think we feel.
I think we should vote.
Feel strongly
Yeah,
enough.
can we just
on them.
vote?
I would vote them over several other players on this list.
So
Yeah,
let's just
can we-
vote for 5.
Yeah, let's make a vote.
All right.
Yeah.
Set it up, Evan.
All right. So should I go in reverse order this time, or
Yeah.
If you want.
Why not?
I'll reverse it for
Yeah.
once. So so Kirk's votes,
Thanks,
feel like
buddy.
they matter more as the chairman. Jeff, why don't you start?
I'm gonna go Kevin Williams.
Hey, we're voting for 5, just so you know.
Yep. Devin Hester. Richmond Webb. Steve Wisniewski. Then, oh God. Just to make Vinny happy, Henry Ellard.
Also too, Paul did vote before he had to leave the chat.
Oh, what did Paul vote?
Paul voted for Jared Allen, Willie Anderson, Andre Johnson, Kevin Williams, and Devin Hester.
So you just went to the top 5. Okay.
There we go.
Might as well.
Dan, go ahead.
Like the running back list.
I'm up.
Yeah, Dan Kelly.
Okay. I will vote for Andre Johnson, Kevin Williams, Rodney Harrison, Richmond Webb, and Steve Wisniewski.
Tom Hall. I'm sorry, Jack. Sorry, Jack. I'm going the wrong order.
I've got Hester, Richmond Webb, Kevin Williams, Andre Johnson, and Sean Alexander.
Dave.
I'll go Ricky Waters, Andre Johnson, Willie Anderson, Kevin Williams, and Henry Ellard.
Now it's your turn, Tom. Sorry about that. Tom. Hall.
No problem. Kevin Williams, Devin Hester, Henry Ellard, Jared Allen, Sean Alexander.
Wayne.
Let me go with Wisniewski, Rodney Harrison, Devin Hester, Kevin Williams, and Willie Anderson.
Bill.
Jared Allen, Henry Ellard, Andre Johnson, Steve Wisniewski, Kevin Williams.
Dan Newman.
Allen, Wisniewski, Harrison, Ellard, and Hester.
Vinny.
Hester, Wisniewski, Ellard, Johnson, and did I say Hester?
You did, yeah.
Then what the hell? Kevin Williams, of course.
Chris.
Kevin Williams, Devin Hester, Henry Ellard, Jared Allen, and Willie Anderson.
Ted.
See, I've got Andre Johnson, Jared Allen, Kevin Williams. I've got Richmond Webb, and Willie Anderson.
Chairman.
Okay, Jared Allen, Kevin Williams, Devin Hester, Sean Alexander, Henry Ellard.
And if I didn't vote for Williams or Ellard, you guys would think something was weird. So I'm also voting for Rodney, Andre Johnson, and oh man, I am torn. I don't think it necessarily matters. I'm going to actually go with Wisniewski as my last one over Hester. So
Actually, it will matter because that puts us in a two-way tie for fifth, I believe.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, so it does matter.
Runoff.
Apples in my heart. Runoff. I love it. Yes.
Runoff election, just like in the New York City mayoral election. I should know.
Or,
I'm
or
right.
So the
we did
results.
finish the tie before. We could put
I
the
think-
16 through.
You
So-
could, but I'm not.
For
I don't
those-
think
for those-
the NFL,
those-
I don't think they do that.
Well, they did it. They did it last time. They did
Yeah, they
26.
did it in the semis.
They do it in the semis, but I don't think it's ever happened for the finalists.
Finalists.
But
All right, hold on a second. For people who are listening on the podcast, you can't see all of this. So our final results are Kevin Williams with 13, Devin Hester with 9, Henry Ellard with 9, Andre Johnson with 8, Jared Allen and Steve Wisniewski with 7, Willie Anderson 5, Rodney Harrison, Richmond Webb 4, Sean Alexander 3, Ricky Waters 1. So Anderson, Harrison, Webb, Alexander, and Waters are cut at this point. Let me just put this down the bottom. We have 4 guys who are officially in. Are we just going to do a quick runoff for the remaining people?
yeah,
Do we need to have a discussion between Jared Allen and Wisniewski? It's been a while since we talked about Wisniewski. I don't know if we even talked much about Jared Allen.
If we're gonna talk about Wisniewski, I'd like to open that up to Wayne, who saw him play a lot more than all of us.
Oh, definitely. So Wayne, how come Raiders fans don't like to talk about him? please tell us why.
For the most part, because they only pay attention to where the ball is. And me as being a student of the game, the games are won and lost right there in the trenches. And this guy, you talk about availability, he was a rock. Even when he was injured, he was out there. Tape me the fuck up and let me get on the field. And that's just what I admired about him. He wasn't a me, rah-rah guy, but what he did to the guy in front of him for all the years I watched him, that guy had to bring a big-ass lunch bucket. So he was just a mauler, man.
Anyone for Jared Allen?
Well, I just want to say, if I am ever not here, I would like Wayne to be my proxy vote. He
Wayne,
likes
I got
the
a
big
question
dirty
for
guys.
you.
I love it.
I'm curious why Raider fans never really push for Wisniewski. You always see Plunkett or somebody else, but I never see Wisniewski being pushed passionately on social.
Because of what Wayne just
You
said.
know why, Ted? They didn't understand his personality. He wasn't there to be liked. He was there to inflict pain, and that's what he did.
I gotcha.
And I love Raiders fans, but goddamn, these guys have mentioned John Matuzak and Matt Millen's name more than they mentioned Steve Wisniewski when it comes to like seriously, guys.
Yeah, there's a piece there of like epitomizing the Raider mystique or whatever versus superior football player.
Wisniewski never played slaw.
Yeah, that's true. Baby Ruth.
Baby Ruth. Baby Ruth.
Somebody said it earlier about the media darlings. That has a lot to do with how people sway one way or the other. But if you just watch the game for the actual carnage, then hey, that guy's a shoe-in to me.
I mean, when it comes to like Wisniewski, this is a guy that's only been a semifinalist once, and I think that was like 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. Like to me, if you're talking about the all pros and the all decades, this is a guy that you better put in. I mean, yes, you could say, oh, 6 of them were second team. Doesn't matter at this point. He's been to 8 AP all pros. If you're going to care about those so much, if you're going to talk about all pros as much and all decades as much, this guy you better have on there. And yes, he wasn't a rah-rah kind of guy, but he came to do his job, and that is actually required. You want to know what is not required? Being a celebrity. You don't get paid to want to simply be a celebrity, because that's not going to win football games. But what is going to win football games is being the Rock, being the stalwart on that Raiders line. And yes, it was unfortunate that his final game was the Tuck Rule game. And it's unfortunate for him that he didn't get to go to a Super Bowl. Instead, that was actually Lomas Brown's final year, if I recall. But for him, Wisniewski, to me, as much as Allen is big on the pass rush, there are better pass rushers I can consider that played during that same position. Compared to other people that played guard at that time, Wisniewski is in a class on his own. And I think Wisniewski, by far, even though Allen was a finalist last year, is the better overall football player in comparison.
What Dan brought up earlier when he was talking about the Rodney Harrison comparison and Leroy Butler versus some of the other guys that played at the same time. Wisniewski's peers, the competition at the time, were Bruce Matthews, Larry Allen, and McDaniel. And that, I think, has been held against him, is how many interior linemen can you put in that you don't have the quantifiable stats or metrics for? But when you talk about, he was second team all decade in the 90s, and that is on there with Larry Allen. Like, so at his time, he was viewed in the similar light to Larry Allen and not that far off from Bruce Matthews, Randall McDaniel. To your point, Vinny, like 2-time AP All-Pro, 8-time Pro Bowler, like he has more of those accomplishments, I think, are similar.
8-time AP All-Pro. 6 of them were second team, but if you compare them all together, 8 times. It
tells the further story, Vinny, to your point about, like, when you look at the fact that the guy missed, I think, 2 years in a 13-year career.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 2 games in a 13-year career, and you could point to a decade of absolute dominance at the position. Like, that feels like when you say, what's the eyeball test or the piss test for the Hall of Fame? Like, you were among the absolute best in your position for an entire decade. Wisniewski was.
Well, one last thing I just wanted to add. So I have 5 older brothers that I talk to about all of this type of stuff. And one criteria that we always use when discussing these guys is, if you let in that guy, who else gets in? Because they're either on the same tier or even better. And so, like, when I brought up Henry Ellard, because you guys convinced me about his worthiness in the last discussion, I mentioned him to one of my brothers, and he immediately texted me back, so when does Irving Fryer get in? And then, you know, and not that it's apples to apples, but that's kind of how we rate a lot of these guys. And so Wisniewski, I was one of the 3 people that voted for him. Part of my reasoning is, if he gets in, that doesn't open the door for anyone else. There's no one else that you say he was as good or better than Wisniewski, and he's not in yet. You know, maybe Logan Mankins is the next generation, where 10 years from now, someone's having this debate about Mankins. But for now, I think Wisniewski is not in, like Vinny said, with Allen, you could point to other pass rushing sack specialists and say that their overall body of work was, DeMarcus Ware was clearly better, and he's already in there. And
how long did Kevin Green
so to me, Wisniewski would get my vote easily.
So do we have anyone to talk about Jared Allen? Because we had the same number of votes on this. So
yeah, I think also at this point, just because it is getting late, and believe it or not, I got another show that I'm doing in 20 minutes that I got to prep for. So are we good at this point just to do our final vote?
Does anyone have anything to say about Jared Allen?
Love the hair.
This about Jared Allen is, look at him, like, he has some of the tangible metrics, and he was a very good player. But how long did it take Kevin Green to get in the Hall of Fame?
That guy should not have taken 16 years. Like, the guy was 3rd all time in sacks, and it took him 16 years to make it. And the fact that he's now no longer with us is sad, but at least he made it when he was alive. Sure. And it's kind of hard for me to really go with, like, hey, if you're gonna, like, push him for so long, despite arguably being better at his position, I would argue you can't just go ahead with Allen now because the hair is nice and he may be playing curling, but like I said, Allen, you can compare to other guys and say other people were better. You can't say the same thing with Niski.
Yeah, like if you look at Dwight Freeney, I think was a better edge rusher. And Peppers, Taylor, like thinking all those guys from the 2000s all decade team, they were better all around football players. Not only were they great pass rushers, they were also great against the run. I don't think you could ever say Jared Allen was great against the run.
I'm going to jump off, guys. So I got to get going, but hey,
All right, so let's just vote.
I'm cool with.
Let's just vote quickly because we can just bump it down, Tom, and then you need to get out.
I just want to say one other thing real quick. I just feel 12 of us had Allen on the list before we did all this. 3 had Wisniewski. I think both are going to be good candidates. It's just, I find it hard to believe we're debating this much over a 12-3 beforehand. So nothing's really changed in their career accolades.
Very good point. You don't think that Allen got worse, but this got better this evening?
Right.
Oh, it's like with baseball. Oh, your vote goes up, so you get better by not doing anything. Oh, just sit on your ass.
I will say I voted for both of them, but I didn't vote for several other guys that are already through.
Yeah, I have never once in my life voted for Jared Allen. So
it's time to vote, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, all right, Kirk, what do you got?
I'm going to do this a little strategic because I think we can talk about Jared Allen's going to be a finalist. So we're going to be combining them anyway. I'd like to do a deeper dive on Wisniewski. So
Okay.
I'm picking Steve Wisniewski.
Ted?
I'll just go with Allen just because I picked him originally.
Chris?
I'll go with Jared Allen as well.
Vinny?
I mean, duh, Wisniewski.
Dan Newman?
Allen.
All right. Did Tom vote before he got out of here?
Jared Allen.
Yes,
He voted Jared Allen. Okay. Bill?
Jared Allen.
Wayne?
Wisniewski.
Dave?
Jared Allen.
Jack?
Wisniewski.
Dan?
Wisniewski.
Jeff?
We're going to end up with a tie. Holy
We're
shit.
not because we have an odd number of people. So
Okay, good. Wisniewski.
And I already told you I have never once in my life voted for Jared Allen.
Yes!
I'm not voting for Jared Allen.
Who that man?
Yay, Steve.
There's Jared Allen. I don't get it. So
He
all right.
his face and it was really cool.
Yeah, well, I know. Like I
Yeah,
said,
like wow,
if
just
Jared-
what a jump Wisniewski.
if Jared
geez.
Allen had a haircut, we'd be having a whole separate conversation.
Wayne should be very happy. Wayne should
Okay.
be very happy.
So with that, Evan, if you can read off for those listening, just the 15 that we did pick, and then
Yep.
I'll just do some closing remarks.
Yep. So we have Patrick Willis, Tony Baselli, DeMarcus Ware, Zach Thomas, Reggie Wayne, Torrey Holt, Steve Tasker, Rondé Barber, Richard Seymour, Leroy Butler, Kevin Williams, Devin Hester, Henry Ellard, Andre Johnson, and Steve Wisniewski.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, all of you who sat through all this, thank you so much. Thank you for listening. Thank you all of you who are on this.
Thanks for participating, guys.
Yes, this means a lot to Evan and I. I hope we've done a good job articulating that, and I hope everyone is just having fun. At the end of the day, it's a fun debate. We don't need to get super personal about this. And I think we all did a pretty damn good job, which is why I think we all want to come back to this. If there's someone listening or viewing this and wants to be a part of this and think they can bring a unique perspective, especially if you're from a different fan base that we're not, that's not represented, that would be awesome. We would love to have you. With that, I guess it's my usual close. Stay safe, everybody.
Take care. Thanks, guys.
Terrible. This is awesome.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, guys. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Dan.
Happy
Good seeing you all
holidays.
again.
Happy holidays, guys.
All right,
Yeah,
thanks.
happy holidays to you. Happy New Year, everybody.
Take care.
Right, bye.
Best of luck, guys.